sequoia.
And they seem to
Good
not be
afternoon.
affected by the
Thank you for
virus,
joining
which
us
is
for our February 9th work session. Up first, we have a discussion of the state's fiscal and economic climate with our comptroller, Peter Franchow, and members of his team. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Mayor Keller. I'm delighted to be with you, and all things about Hagerstown and all things about Western Maryland. So thank you for letting us swing by. I have my Bureau of Revenue Estimates Director, very, very expert Andy Schoffel here, who can give you the kind of the status of the economy. He's a little more optimistic than I am. He's the glass half full. I'm the glass half empty, because we right now, as we speak, have 463,000 Maryland low-wage earning families with dependent children. That's a lot, mostly from the hospitality sector. A lot of suffering going on, as you know. Hagerstown is not immune, of course. We hope that you're buoyed a little bit by our call center that we put in specifically to provide a little bit of state support and state employment. And we also have our satellite office in Hagerstown limits, I believe. And if there's anything we can do, Emily Hollis, AKA Emily Gontram, because she's now got 2 kids, not with her husband, John Gontram, but she somehow has her old name underneath her. But Emily can be a contact for you guys if you need anything from the comptroller's office. Andy Schoffel, of course, can also. I'll just quickly say that I am, my cell phone number is 301-332-1961. Anybody that's on this call that has any concerns about glitches by my agency, by the agency, the comptroller's office, just text me or voicemail me or call me, and we will fix it promptly. And what do we have to look forward to? In my humble opinion, all attention is on the virus. If the virus is corralled, then we can begin to get back to normal. We do have a national strategy now that makes sense. The vaccinations are frustrating and confusing, but hopefully they will get rolled out. Hopefully they will also be protective against the mutant variants, or whatever they're called. If the virus is not controlled, we're going to be in a very, very difficult situation. That's all I can say. And I urge people to keep an eye on the progress of the virus and efforts to control it. If it is controlled, I think we can get back to economic activity and school attendance and restaurants as we are somewhat accustomed to. But if we don't control the virus, I find that average Marylanders are very intelligent. And they're very aware, regardless of what us politicians say about it being safe to do this or safe to do that. If they don't think it's safe, we can open anything up. Everything, open up. And they're not going to come, because not until they feel they're safe. And that's what we've left out of this equation. I have been the chief tub thumper for criticizing the governor's COVID relief plan. I don't think it's an adequate relief plan. I think it's way too trickle down grants down the road that are not particularly necessary right now. They can be postponed for a short period of time while we concentrate on the 463,000 families of folks that earn less than $50,000. And that's my priority. A half a block from where I'm sitting right now in Sycamore Avenue in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Once again, as there is every day, there are 100 low-income people lined up with their jackets, waiting for a free box of food. I find that to be an utter travesty, given the wealth of this state and the wealth of this country. And I urge you all to think about the folks in Hagerstown and your surrounding area. Obviously, you know them. They're going through a lot of suffering for no good reason, and a lot of humiliation, which really galls me. I would prefer the state of Maryland to walk up and down this line of destitute people standing in the cold to try to get something for their family. I'd like the state to go up and give them a $100 bill each and say, why don't you go in to the Tacoma Park Food Co-op that they're in the parking lot of? Why don't you go in with this $100 bill and buy your own groceries in a dignified, independent way? But this state, for some reason, has chosen to basically turn its back on these unbelievably suffering people right now. The rest of us, 2/3 of us, that's not the 463,000, that's only a third of our workforce or of our people, and they're the most heavily affected in the hospitality sector, as I said. The other 2/3 of us are fine. We're sitting in protected environments like you guys are in, like I'm in. We're getting paid. We're working remotely, like I am. I have money in the bank, and I can order food, and I'm protected. These people aren't. And boy, do we owe them a lot more than what we're giving them right now. So I know you guys support me out in Hagerstown because there's always been a lot of economic challenges in your area. And I just want to let you know that we are doing everything we can for small businesses and these low-wage earning families. I've deferred taxes for months on end, assuming that that's an interest-free, penalty-free loan from the state to these citizens. We have, we're going to urge the Internal Revenue Service to do it again for everybody, not just small businesses as we've done, and some individuals. So that, to me, is a desirable relief effort because it leaves money in people's pockets. They then have to pay us the taxes they owe, but every responsible business has come up and nobody has failed that task. We've worked with the governor on many things to reform the state's alcohol laws so that restaurants can include mixed cocktails with their takeout. We have all sorts of information about what's taxable and what isn't taxable. I will just finish by saying the only reason we're in a relatively stable position right now, and all of us are not in the recession that these bottom 1/3 of our citizens are, is the fact that the federal government put more than $20 billion into Maryland last summer and last fall. It's an extraordinary life preserver that was tossed us. We may get another $10 billion, I hope we do. But I'm encouraging people to think that in addition to helping our citizens and our small businesses that are hanging on by a thread survive, we also need a considerable stimulus applied to the entire economy. Otherwise, we run the risk of the recession that's affecting the lower third, infecting and damaging the top 2/3 and spreading. I hope and pray that never happens, but it's the federal government that has the scale of, the ability to print money in effect. We don't have that in Maryland. That I'm encouraging the federal government to be as generous as it possibly can. And then, of course, I'm urging the state of Maryland to focus on this immediate suffering and immediate closing of small businesses and stay away from the very large programs that they're talking about for the time being, because those just blast an enormous hole in the state budget, 2021 fiscal year and 2022 fiscal year. So we want to be of service to you guys, Mayor Keller. I'm going to turn it over to Andy Schaffel and let him correct me because I probably didn't quite get it all right. But, we're facing some very, hopefully everything works out just fine. I've got my fingers and toes crossed. It could be, unfortunately, based on what happens with the virus, a really difficult year ahead of us. Andy, go ahead, it's all yours. Glass half full, okay. Glass half empty just turned over to glass half full. Go with it.
Oh, all right, I'm there, sir. Glass half full. Maryland craft beer half full, ideally. You didn't get anything wrong there. The state's entire economic outlook is predicated on the core foundation that the vaccines are, one, working, and two, near, the concept of herd immunity by this summer. So that's very, very important. Maryland, we lost almost 400,000 jobs in a month, in 1 month. To put that into context, in the Great Recession, we lost a bit more than 200,000 jobs over the course of 2 years. So this is just truly unprecedented. And as the comptroller stated, it's not an even impact. And that is owing to the federal government. The $20 billion they pumped into Maryland, immediately in that first stimulus, kept the recession from spreading. And that's fantastic. I mean, that is truly impressive, but it does leave out the folks that work in the consumer-facing businesses, and those tend to be lower paid jobs. So, our most vulnerable are the most impacted. And then, of course, we're having broader impacts. We're seeing more women step out of the labor force. That has profound consequences for future economic growth potential. So there's a lot going on, and the comptroller's right. We need to be, this is one of those all hands on deck moments where we have a chance to interact with our citizens. We're closest to them. The federal government will keep pumping money out, and they'll do it broadly, but we have the ability to also do some of that. And we have boots on the ground. We know who we can help, and I think that's what he's advocating, and I strongly back his advocation on that, is to get the money to the people that we know need it. And a more sufficient package could make a very large difference. And it's not just a difference in helping these people survive, it's a difference in when the lights do turn back on, of them being able to interact with the economy in a successful way. And not have this drag out. It's one of those things where we may actually save money now, save money in the long run by spending more now. So I'll leave my comments there, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Emily Gontram, do you want to say anything? And please put your contact information up.
Yes, I'll absolutely share my contact information. Just, very appreciative of the opportunity to speak today during your work session. And please do not hesitate to reach out to me if our office can ever be of assistance to either the city or your residents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you guys have any questions? Anything for the comptroller? No? All right. Thank you guys very much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, nobody ever thanks us. We're always viewed as, bad news taxes coming down the road. No, we're on your side, and just count us in if we can do something that is constructive. But Andy, thank you for your excellent work. Andy he's in the comptroller's office, but he's hired by the governor, the treasurer, and myself. He's a kind of a representation of bipartisan expertise in politics, in the sense that the legislature and the governor and the comptroller and the treasurer all work together under his leadership, and he does a fabulous job. If there are any questions about local income transfers and things like that, he's the world's leading expert on that. And all things, as far as Board of Public Works matters, you should probably contact Emily.
Well, thank you.
Thank you,
We
though.
appreciate
Right.
that
Thank you, sir.
partnership.
Thank you for letting us swing by.
It's good to hear that there's bipartisanship in this state and country. We need more of
Well,
that.
the people, Emily, it's funny you asked me that, you mentioned that, because I've often thought, I have my concerns about the governor's relief plan. I think it's lacking, and it's more postponed, as I say, trickle-down relief rather than immediate cash relief, which is what we need. That's okay. I kid him, and I have a relatively good relationship, or at least I did, until I started criticizing him on this. But I noticed that it passed unanimously, this package, in the Senate. Not a single Republican or Democratic no vote. And my wife said to me, my goodness, that is such a demonstration of bipartisanship given the COVID. Isn't that great? I said, well, actually, what it reminds me of is when the Democrats would offer, say, a $3 billion package, and the Republicans would say, no, that's way too much money. We're not going to spend a cent over $2 billion. And they came out of the back room with a compromise of $5 billion.
It's a good
You guys
compromise.
would never recognize that, but you know what I'm saying. There's a little bit of everything for a lot of different people in that COVID relief, but the essence of it is missing, which is, in my view, a $2,000 check to 463,000 Maryland low-wage earning families that earn less than $50,000, and then $250 million more for small businesses in immediate grants, and that could all be absolutely replenished and paid back next month when we go to the debt markets, where we do that on a regular basis. And we could add $1 billion in debt, one time only, to the state's budget and back out general fund payments into capital projects that were made over the last couple of years and replace it with that debt. Those general fund dollars we back out could then be put back into the rainy day fund and the positive fund balance, and it would be budget neutral. Right now, they're taking or planning to take up to several $1 billion out of the general fund budget. Now, maybe that'll be replaced by money from the feds, but what I'm suggesting is there's a much more effective relief plan than what is presently before us. And so, Madam Mayor, you brought up bipartisanship. I apologize. You guys are great. Please stay in touch. And it's a very, very heartfelt appreciation for all the leadership that you show. I just can't tell you what a great amount of cultural beauty there is in Washington County, because it's the kind of area in our state where people pay attention to each other and take care of each other. And we need a lot more of that all around the state. So thank you for what you guys represent, at least in my mind, and if we can be helpful in any way, happy to be of service.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time today.
Take care, have a good rest of the day, and have a good work session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Up next, we have the Healthy Food Initiative discussion with Brooke Grossman, Dave Schuster, and Jordy Newman. Hi, guys.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor and council members. We appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all this afternoon and share some information about a proposed project that we have for the downtown area of Hagerstown. So the information, an expanded version of what I'm going to pull up to share today, has actually been provided in your packets for today. But I want to go ahead and step through some information that we've prepared about this initiative. So really what we've identified is an opportunity to increase the health and vitality of Hagerstown by bringing an innovative food equity solution to the downtown area. And this project has been can be conceptualized since probably about a year ago. And it was, it kind of started when we heard of the Go for Bold initiative, and you start talking about all the different social determinants of health that influence the varying portions of the community and their abilities to lead healthy and thriving lives. As we know, through the course of the pandemic and the course of the remainder of the year, a lot of those critical needs have been highlighted by the pandemic, and so it feels as though that to some extent the time is now that we have an opportunity really to pull together, work as a collaborative group to try to address this. So very early in the process, we started after Moloch launched the Go for Bold with Healthy Washington County. We talked with Dr. Spots and Alan Twigg. And Meredith came out saying we would love to support a project. It's not a project we're able to do, but we'd certainly love to support that because we see how it aligns with all these goals. So why access to food matters, quite honestly, is that it is a fundamental critical need for folks. It is essential to their health, but it also strengthens the local economy. It strengthens the local business environment, and essentially it actually helps in that sense to put money back in the pockets of everybody who lives there, all the way up to your government agencies, by the fact that it's economic development, it's health development, it's workforce development, all wrapped into one sort of project. The area we're talking about specifically in downtown Hagerstown is outlined on this map in blue. And this is, there's two different definitions of what's either low supermarket access or a food desert is the term you typically hear. USDA uses food desert. The reinvestment fund, which is whose data you see here, uses limited supermarket access, but they're both a combination of many data points, including access to transportation, relative economic demographics of the community, race demographics, and a number of other pieces that overlay to say this is a portion of a community that does not have steady access to healthy food. It does not mean that there is no food in the area. As we know, if you look at the map, there's a number of smaller markets that sell mostly prepackaged goods. There's prepared food, there's fast food, which unfortunately in circumstances where you don't have easy access, particularly based on transportation challenges, to healthy food options, you tend to default to those things. So this particular data, this particular map that highlights both that area also overlays the percentage of adults that reported to be obese in that area. And what I will say about this map is that darker green is worse. So that highlights for you that that the health social determinants here pretty clearly overlay with the lack of ready access to a full service grocery store in this portion of the city. So the solution that we would propose is one that has been brought to fruition by multiple other nonprofit and government coalitions, and actually private business coalitions in multiple communities across the country. But it essentially pulls multiple different pieces of the broader food network into a sort of a food hub location. How you do this in each community will look a little bit different. In some cases, there's a heavy emphasis on bringing farm to market sort of products into the area. In other cases, it is simply putting a normal full service grocery store that may be relying on a national food distribution chain to bring the products in there. They are often combined, though, in their best iteration, with a broad spectrum of collaborative groups that would include agricultural producers. It does include retail food distributors. It includes local health practitioners. It includes community groups that can do outreach to folks that are in the neighborhoods and get them engaged in the project. So there's a number of different ways you can go about this. What we're proposing for here, it was somewhere within that blue outlined map of Hagerstown, would be to establish a full service grocery store that would be primarily operated as a program of Horizon Goodwill. So it would be on one of our retail enterprises. To do that for a grocery store of this size and for this model, you only need about 7,000 to 10,000 square feet of space that's suitable for retail, which is a little bit different than you'll imagine some of your larger box grocery stores, your Weis Markets, Martin's, even Lidl and Aldi, quite honestly, take up a little bit more space than that. And one of the key pieces that makes that a critical concept is that you often find in more urban, developed downtown type areas, space for a 22, 25, 30,000 square foot grocery space just doesn't exist practically without doing a significant amount of demolition and reconstruction. That may also be that real estate prices for that size project are incompatible with a for-profit grocery business model. And your other challenge you run into with that is that the surrounding economic demographic data is part of what causes full service grocers to pull to the outskirts where more folks have access to their services, because at the end of the day, they are a for-profit model that's somewhat beholden to shareholders and profit margin in that sense. But establishing a grocery center like that has full access to SNAP and EBT benefits for those families that are eligible for those programs, and that also, by virtue of our being a workforce development agency, the staffing model for an enterprise like this would include job training and job development opportunities for folks who are at some place on their career path to something better. We are always trying to advance folks to the next higher higher wage, higher skill earning, higher developmental job positions. So that would be part of our larger workforce development pipeline. Here in Washington County, as I think probably most everybody knows, we have a wide variety of local agricultural producers. So there would be some intentionality to connect with the local agricultural community as best as possible, to try to bring some of those, try to bring some of those products into the city. One example I can give you, particularly when you look at serving, a portion of the demographic, is if you go out in Smithsburg, there's multiple orchards out here, and they have a wide variety of produce that oftentimes they will sell at discount prices, but you have to be able to get here. And so part of the model is to work on a logistics model that brings those products back into the downtown core in greater volume. And then the last piece of this is the inclusion of multiple other organizations to collaborate to bring education, health, nutrition, and other benefits outreach to those community members and families that would benefit from those sorts of programs into the space. So inclusion of, at a minimum, a teaching kitchen. You can say teaching kitchen or commercial kitchen, depending on exactly what you intend to do with it, and a classroom space that can also be used for community engagement purposes is also an ideal fit for a project such as this. I've already touched on a couple of these things, but benefits of a project like this to the city and to the residents of the city as well. We believe addressing food security clearly aligns with the Go for Bold health initiative, and also addressing some of the inequities that might exist around food access currently by there being a lack of a grocery market of this type in the downtown core. In most communities, presence of a full-service grocery store is an economic development asset. One of the things that you would consider, at least I think a lot of folks consider when looking to potentially relocate to an area, is where do I get my food from? And if the area you're considering purchasing a home or living in doesn't have ready access to food, that may be a no-go for some folks. And you'll often find, if you look at some of the studies where a grocery store pops up, other businesses that have a positive influence also pop up as well. As I mentioned before, creation of jobs and a job training program as part of the model, and intentionality to forge stronger connections with the outlying agricultural producers in the community. And then, quite honestly, I think having a positive solution like this present in any neighborhood is simply a positive influence on the surrounding neighborhood and the activities and the lifestyles of the individuals that live there. One of the things that we've also realized in looking at possible models for this, as opposed to a traditional for-profit grocery model, is that by using a nonprofit model, there's access to funding sources to support a project like this that are not available to the for-profit sector. Some of those funding sources do require the collaboration and support of local government entities to acquire those. Other funding sources are private based. But what that means is that, quite honestly, you can bring a benefit like this to the community without the necessity to generate a profit margin or as great a profit margin, because the project in some senses can be subsidized from a number of different sources, so that you can offer competitive prices even though you're a lower volume grocery store, and you can operate, quite honestly, with lower overhead, so that you can meet those objectives of really having a social impact in the community, as opposed to just coming in to create an enterprise that's there to generate revenue for the business. Ourselves and many of the potential collaborative partners who we've talked about here, we're relatively practiced at this point at engaging the surrounding communities and collaborating with each other to see projects like this to successful fruition, and generating that sort of support and buy-in from the folks in the area. And I think at this point, hopefully we as a goodwill, along with our partners, we're really invested in helping to improve the quality of life for everybody in the community. That is really our prime goal. We traditionally do it through workforce and some economic development initiatives through our retail and lots of our job training opportunities. But we're really invested in seeing the community have opportunities to thrive. So my closing slide here, I won't read through the list. This is an initial look at some of the organizations we've already talked to. we're here to speak with you all about this today. We would certainly aspire to enter into something like this in partnership with our local government. And then, this is by no means an exhaustive list, I think, of all the possible opportunities to connect with both business, nonprofit, government, and private entities to get a project like this off the ground. So with that, I will back off of the slide presentation, and we will happily entertain questions, comments, discussion from anybody who wants to talk about it further.
So I think this is a great initiative and much needed in our community. I guess my first question is, what do you need from us?
Absolutely. We didn't put the ask in the slide because we wanted to have an opportunity to talk about it. Right now, the two main pieces that we need, would be an agreement of collaborative support and cooperation to look at some of those funding opportunities that I mentioned. That we know that there's varying pipelines that those opportunities come from to help support projects like this. There's funding that might help pay for job training programs at this location, funding that might pay towards it being a food equity initiative. So there's a number of pieces there that we would want to work together on. The other piece, quite honestly, is a location. If you look inside that blue map, we need to identify a space that is suitable, that meets those size requirements. And preferably for a project like this, while we can probably access funding to support development of it, to some extent, the less capital investment that we have to put into it initially, the greater the likelihood that the project will succeed initially and long term, as I'm sure that probably makes sense. So those are the two areas of support and assistance I think that we need, and that we believe that the city could potentially help us with.
Can I add one other thing? I'm sorry. Also, too, any kind of brilliant insights, or when you look at that partner list, people that we should be engaging with on this project that you guys may have connection with that we haven't thought of. And part of, I think, the reason we want to have this conversation today was also like, what are we missing, right? And from your perspective, what is needed to get something like this off the ground? So I think that would be the third ask. You guys knew we weren't going to go the whole meeting without me saying anything.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I appreciate the presentation. I guess my curiosity is, while there doesn't appear to be a specific monetary ask in this proposal, I hear the notion of sort of agreeing to partner. Also the notion of identifying an appropriate location. I'm just curious how government then goes and makes the case as that partner to private venture entities that are providing this comparable product. What government's role is in picking an entity that is then competing with those private enterprises.
I think there's a couple of key components here to consider, and I think you're right to raise up that concern. I think one of the issues that I would raise up is there anyone else who is truly a competitive entity that was potentially looking to do a project like this? If there is, perhaps we can collaborate, and it can be a merged project there as well. To this point in time, we were not aware of any potential development of a full service type grocery store for the downtown area, which is one of the many reasons we thought it was a conversation worth having. I think the rest of the role, I think, at least from my understanding, and the reason there's no specific financial ask as of yet is part of the challenge with it is to know what the full budget and the full project cost is going to be. We need to identify that location and what work would need to be done to actually establish it as a grocery store. So that piece is a little bit of a work in progress, to be honest. But at that point, if support is garnered, it's a matter of going down this path. There are some specific federal programs specifically that pass through to localities to support very specific food initiative type programs such as this that would potentially funnel through city government. There's also potentially letters of support and that kind of support for other grant and private funding opportunities. So I think you're right to suggest that there would need to be contemplation and decision about is this a beneficial opportunity to bring to the city, and is there any risk, I suppose, that we're going to be setting up something that would compete with any other business that might want to do this. I think what I would lift up right now is we don't see evidence of that. But if there is, then certainly that would be something that we'd also be happy to consider looking at how that might work as well. Because at the end of the day, we would rather try to see a solution of any kind, and we think that's really what the outcome should be and what we're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, I guess for me, like when I think of places like the market, you know, two buildings down from here, or I guess it's Carmine. You know, places that we don't think about as grocery stores. I guess I just wouldn't want to be as government doing that and then finding out 2 months down the road, because we as partners agreed to fund this project and provided the opportunity for groceries to be at X amount of cost from the provider because government is funding part of that ability to do so, that now these markets are closing because their prices are simply 30% higher because they're not getting that type of government funding to make them competitive enough. And then suddenly these places that do operate as, we'll call them food convenience, you know, smaller grocers, close up because they lose that business because they don't have that 30%, you know, subsidy from the government to competitively provide the same product at the same cost.
But it's my understanding, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is more of a healthy foods initiative, which is not in those convenience stores. They're more, I mean, I think that is
I think
more,
that's an assumption. I mean, you go to Buyers Stop and Go on Burhans Boulevard, and you know, I grew up a little bit of time on Mitchell Avenue, and we went there because if you go there, they're twice or three times the size they were back in the day, and they do provide an aisle of fresh produce that's always just about empty because people are sort of, you know, constantly buying it up and clearing it out. And all I'm saying is, I don't agree with an initiative that would make it, you know, put something in that neighborhood where now you can sell that head of lettuce for 30 cents because you're able to do so through a subsidy process whereby that vendor is selling it for 70 cents in there. And I don't care whether you pick that one or Dick's Market where it used to be, those types of places. All I'm saying is, if we're going to venture into this, and I understand the impetus for it, it shouldn't be at the detriment of small grocers, frankly, in these neighborhood areas that are then not going to be able to compete to provide that same product because they're not getting the subsidy to do so.
I definitely think that there is I think where there's a will, there's a way, and I do believe that this is something that the community needs. So not only for, you know, the lower income and I think that some of the demographics that you were saying, but we're talking about a downtown that we want to promote and that we want people to live, and we've got artist lofts, and this is the kind of amenity that people expect is a full-service grocery store. I think that it's important. I mean, our community's been needing this for years, this kind of thing. So.
I'm not opposed to it.
Right, so
No.
I think that we have to. Right.
I'm opposed to it creating unfair market balance.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
Providers that provide that commodity for purchase.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that, Brooke, in answer to your question, I think that one of the entities to bring to the table might be the Commission on Aging. Definitely another area that could probably be helpful in a discussion like this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important. I think that we need to figure out how in the world to make it happen and make sure that it's fair for all those involved.
And I think, sorry, Jordy.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brooke.
I was just gonna say, it's so hard. We should all have to do this too, just so you know. I think it's important to keep in mind that while there will be a benefit for those that accessibility with lack of transportation or who purchase their groceries with SNAP benefits or other subsidies are certainly gonna benefit from this. As Shelley said, this becomes an amenity to downtown too. And the people in town who maybe live downtown but drive out of the city that aren't going to the Dick's Market or the Buyer Stop and Go for their groceries may now do their business in town, which is a reinvestment in the city center as well, where this location would be. So it is not targeting, while one group certainly may have a different benefit than another, it is meant to serve the whole city or that center area. And I just think that's important to remember. Not a secret to any of you, I live downtown. I would go to a grocery store if it was a couple of blocks from my house and happily not drive to the other side of town to purchase my groceries.
Yeah,
I'm done, Jordan.
I think of myself going to Save-A-Lot, which happens to be in the South End Shopping Center now, right? And that, as a grocer, has to cover the cost of rent at that place. You know, or if they buy the property and build it themselves, have to cover that cost. All I'm saying is you're able to offer the product then at a skewed level if you, the provider, don't have to worry about covering the cost of a building that you invested in. You don't have to worry about the cost of renting at a place, and you're trying to provide that same product at a competitive level. I just don't want to see those be the bystanders, you know, that lose, frankly, and have to close up because that occurs, because it's going to have that indirect shift on those places that consumers, you know, are shopping at.
Dave, you had said that this isn't a new model, right? So this is not a new concept. I would imagine that same kind of issue might be in other areas. So do you have any insight on how they've done it or how it works?
For the most part, it is if you consider the nonprofit as the private side, it's often a public-private partnership. You know, I think there's probably some clarity that could also be shared here. You know, I don't know, to be perfectly honest, exactly how much lower the actual price point for products at a model that's created this way would be versus at you know, some comparable markets, quite honestly. What this is more an initiative to do is get a project like this that's large enough to provide significant impact to the community off the ground. You know, and the recognition that it's not so much that that absence of needing to make a profit means that a market like this can undercut everybody else. It's a matter of that it can to some extent thrive in a place where there's not going to be probably the same level of comparable sales or the same level of income of shopper that there are in other places where a traditional grocery retailer would locate themselves. So, you know, but there's a couple of comparable models here, and one of the partnerships actually that dictates the price of that food is who your food supply vendors end up being and what you negotiate with them. And so there's a key piece there that nobody in this room right now has any say in. You know, we're not actually looking for subsidizing the cost of the food itself. That's part of the business expense. That's part of operating the business. This is to some extent location, startup expenses, to be perfectly honest, and some other things, which factor in a small percentage of overhead into the price margin, but not a significant amount ongoing, to be clear. And perhaps what I'm hearing is that if we're able to proceed down a path of working collaboratively on this, some additional insight towards that, some specific funding numbers and models might be helpful to provide some more clarity and insight there. Because you're right, we're also not suggesting and trying to get in the business of putting anybody else out of business. That is the last thing that we would intend to do here. We are trying to offer a larger alternative, a larger variety of healthier foods that theoretically, based on comparable models from other locales, has a larger impact in sort of moving that health and access needle.
Are you currently looking at any buildings?
Other than, if you look at that map, in an ideal world, it would be somewhat centrally located if you want to try to get both, the downtown area to have access, the portion that's south of downtown and the portion that's north into the Jonathan Street community. So immediately you do get a little limited in terms of available reasonable real estate that meets the criteria within that range. I think we would actually be interested in a conversation about ideas on that one too, to what Brooke said earlier, on what might be identified as a location that, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could do that here? If that makes sense. I know there's a number of different available properties. We've talked with Jill's team about a number of things previously. Some of them, there was one that was privately held right now, but what an initial look was $500,000 just to redo the floor to make it a commercial retail viable space, which, to my earlier point, doesn't seem like a viable startup cost for an enterprise like this. So I think that was part of the ask. Was to sort of try to work together to try to see if we could identify a location that would make sense.
Like the farmer's market?
I think that would certainly present a unique opportunity to bundle maybe even a larger food hub project in one location there. And, that would certainly enhance the piece of connection with the local agricultural community, among other things.
Do you guys have any other questions for them? I mean, I think this is a much needed project. We've talked about downtown being a food desert for as long as I've been in office.
Yeah, really.
So, I mean,
Can I chime in real fast? I'm not against trying to figure something out that makes fiscal sense and responsibility wise, because, I can go back 20 years ago when Debbie Everhart and I tried for probably a year to entice a grocer to come into downtown, offering wild incentives and everything else. But back then, no one wanted to take that risk because, they felt that they didn't have the clientele that they would need in order to be successful, which again is one of the reasons why CVS moved from downtown out to Cannon Avenue. Basically the same issues. And to Kristen's point, I understand that, you're not subsidizing directly the cost of goods, but you are subsidizing the amount of overhead that you have, which of course, makes whatever the cost of goods is, so that you can meet your overhead. But, and it's not just little places like down here at Spickler's or anything else. I mean, a lot of people, what about Audi, who just had a big rehab of their building out there on the dual highway, or Lytle, or Weiss out on the dual. And if you go further to Martin's, and all those are going to be affected to one degree or another. But we're helping to subsidize an entity that is in direct competition to what they're doing. Again, not against it, just saying that there's, maybe for us, it's just like any other project would be, that we would offer, tax incentives or things like that, as opposed to, help to subsidize startup or whatever.
I think that
tax exempt.
if you think about it, someone that lives in the downtown or Jonathan Street area and they need to go get a head of lettuce, you're gonna pay more at a convenience store or one of the small stores than you are at an actual grocery store. And so for people that have that have EBT, they're actually spending money, if they don't have transportation to get to a grocery store to get something fresh. They're spending more money actually buying from a convenience store than if they were to get to Walmart or someplace like that. And so I think a grocery store where people can get more for their benefits closer would absolutely be ideal for our community. You have people that just don't have transportation, and especially you think the Jonathan Street area, the closest place is to come down to Spickler. But if you're 70 years old and you don't have the transportation to take that walk downtown, is actually not, it's not that far, but it is if you're an older person. So a grocery store downtown actually would make a lot of sense, because County Market, I don't know how long it's been, but that was the grocery store that, my family would walk to in order to get groceries. And so there's not anything in that community that people can just walk to besides convenience places, and you're spending more at a convenience spot.
And beyond that, the job training. I mean, we've talked about that, for years, about how to encourage, job training and goodwill. You guys already do that. You already know how to do that. So to be able, I just think that it's a fantastic idea. I've always thought it was a great idea. I hope that there's something that we can do to make it work and make fiscal sense. And I think we're all kind of on that same page.
The other thing I'll just say, and I'm sorry, you guys, if somebody else was about to say something, it's hard for me to tell, but it's so multifaceted. And the other piece of this too is the overall health education that is underlying with this. When you look at that map and you see the health issues that are plaguing that food desert, it is that, yes, there are smaller grocery stores there that may have limited availability of a head of lettuce and some tomatoes and a cucumber, but they don't have a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables. And by default, then people buy what is affordable, right? They buy pre-made foods or processed foods that you can get you can get 6 boxes of macaroni and cheese for $2. But if you bought fresh cheese and other things, that would be beyond what you can afford. And so part of this initiative too is helping people to learn how to prepare meals and cook at home and care for themselves and their families, so that those underlying health conditions that are plaguing us, like diabetes and hypertension, can also be addressed. So there's a whole nother factor to the overall health and wellness of our community beyond just access, but education and support that a project like this presents.
And during my campaign this summer,
Well, I think it's also important to note that when we say full service grocery store, we're not talking about having a bakery in there or a butcher shop or seafood like Martin's or Food Lion. So, we're looking to provide 1 or 2 options of different types of beans or what have you, but it's really meant to fill the need for the downtown community. I mean, our food pantry this past year distributed 94,225 pounds of food to 3,700 households. The need is there. They don't have transportation. They typically walk to the office to get the food that they need. For them to pay for a taxi to go to a Walmart or Aldi or one of the other grocery stores, that cuts into the money that they can actually spend to buy groceries. It really defeats the purpose. So I think we need to look at, what our demographic is and what our goals to accomplish are not to be the premier grocery store in Hagerstown. We're looking to fill a need that's been here for a long time. And, to Brooke's point earlier with purchasing healthier food, I mean, we have clients that have to debate between paying for their medication or paying for their rent, let alone talk about getting groceries. So, if we're able to provide this resource to them at a fair rate, they're able to then pay for their rent, pay for their utilities. They have money to take care of their other bills. So I guess it's important to look at the purpose of this and not just to look at it as, are we trying to compete to put convenience stores out of business downtown, which is clearly not the goal.
Let me try
I
this again.
completely
Can
agree. I
anybody
think
hear
you
me?
need to be cognizant of that, though.
Go ahead, Tara.
Yes, earlier in the summer, when Gordy reached out to me to ask about the Jonathan Street community and if they wanted a grocery store in the area. So my team at the time went door to door in Jonathan Street, Prospect, Sumans, Park Place, you name it. And pretty much the answers were, sure, yes, we need a grocery store because like Councilwoman Takesha mentioned that, you know, County Market was this grocery store back in the day. And ever since that left, it's been a food desert in that area. And they said, you know, we're tired of seeing liquor stores pop up in our communities, so why can't we have a grocery store like other neighborhoods? So I'm all for this project, and also wanted to quickly remind people that there's a food drop that the center, Robert W. Johnson Center, has on Fridays to address that issue. But it would be nice to have a everyday food distribution that the people who can't afford it can get it on a regular basis. That's all.
Do you guys have anything else?
No.
What's our next steps? Now what?
Yeah.
We'll keep talking
Okay.
with them. Yeah, we'll have something back to you, working with them. We'll have something back to you. I hate working with these three, so it's gonna be hard.
Oh,
but-
gosh.
But you know how that is.
Thank you guys for your time. And I'm digging your background there, the cultural trail. Nice choice.
Yeah, really. Good job.
Likewise, I think that was Dan Spedden's team that pulled some of these together, if memory serves. I think that's what the logo behind my shoulder is. But I just want to thank you all for your insight, your commentary, and your suggestions today. As I heard Scott say in the background, we'll take that back and work to refine this a little bit. And you know, we'll keep working with the administration to see what we can push this forward, so to the benefit of everybody. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. All right. Good to go? All right, up next we have fiscal year 20 popular annual financial report.
I don't know how popular it is. I don't know how popular it is.
Good evening. Michelle and I are here tonight to present to you the City of Hagerstown FY20 Popular Annual Financial Report, also called the PAFR. The PAFR can be described as a more user-friendly version of the CAFR, which is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. It takes some of the most important financial information and presents it in a more visually appealing way using charts and graphs. Its intent is to make it easier to understand to someone who may not necessarily have a background in finance. The city has not published a PAFR since FY11, and it's been a goal of the Finance Department to begin producing the PAFR again for the last year or so, and we accomplished that goal. So we're just going to briefly take you through it. It's only 9 pages.
And so I'm going to just take a minute to, for those of you, I think most of you here in this room know Brooke Garver. She is our accounting and budget manager. And as we go through this document, I do want to say, and we were going to end with it, that this document has been available and is out on the City of Hagerstown's website. Right now, it is available on our landing page as one of the spotlight items. It is also under, if you look under Government Departments and Accounting and Finance, you will see it is 2 different versions. One is an electronic PDF, and the other is this version that we're going to flip through this evening, which is more booklet style.
Okay, so the first page is titled A Message from the City Administrator. It answers the question, what is the PAFR, which we just went over. It also includes a paragraph, which is a requirement of the GFOA, stating that while the PAFR is derived from the CAFR, it is not considered GAAP compliant, nor is it audited. So for readers who require that, it directs them back to the CAFR. There's also a letter from Scott that points out some key financial indicators, such as net position, which was $203.6 million, general fund reserve, which is equal to 3.5 months of expenditures, and the city's bond rating, He also touches on the effect that COVID had on the city's financial results as of June 30th, 2020. And the second page is titled About the City of Hagerstown. It goes over the services offered by the city, its form of government, a picture of the previous administration, since this was as of June 30th, 2020, a description of our community and its location. The next page is titled Financial Structure. It lists all of the city's funds by type and their purpose.
And this page and document, I'm going to say, by far and large, you know, this is something that is definitely missing from our CAFR, which, again, we have, everything that's in our CAFR is things that are mandated and required to be there. But I think, you know, we sit at the table and we talk about things like the governmental funds or the general fund, and then we talk about things like business and proprietary funds. This page, somebody's taking control. So on page 3, you can see a listing of all the funds. And again, it's the name of the fund and if that fund is actually considered a governmental fund or not, and also the purpose of the fund. Because what happens a lot of times is, you know, some may say, oh, we made so much money in the water funds, let's just use that to pay salaries for Michelle and all of accounting. Well, that doesn't work because, again, it's divvied up and very structured by fund, and there's restrictions oftentimes within these funds on what can and cannot be simply transferred from one to the other. And I'm sorry, we are having a little bit of a technical difficulty, so we have somebody behind the scenes helping. Thank you.
And just to note, at the bottom of page 3, it also foreshadows the stormwater management fund, which we created in FY21. The next page is titled Financial Results, and it focuses on net position.
And so net position is a fancy word. Several years ago, the CAFR and GASB, the counting language kind of took away fund balance and called everything net position. So whether you're looking at an income statement or a balance sheet, everything is called net position. This is a key area, and we just want to differentiate between pages 4 and 5. Again, we talk a lot about what is net position. We talk about what is the reserve policy and where we can utilize those reserves. And those are short little paragraphs, not very long, not like 400 pages of documents to flip through to get to that information. But then the actual chart, so just a note that the chart on page 4 is more a city-wide combined total. So in the middle, you see changes in net position. You see it says governmental activities, and that's our governmental funds. Again, general fund and other. In the middle, you see business type, and then you see a grand total. So that if you look at the very bottom, for fiscal year 20 across the city, we had total cumulative net position of 203. Again, I just want to point out that this is citywide, and this page is after we consider the impacts of OPEB and police and fire pension, as well as state of Maryland pension. Versus if you look at page 5 is much more a snapshot of our general fund, which by far and large, as you are going to see, property taxes is the largest revenue source, right? 32 million out of 46 million total for fiscal year 20. And then the expenses at the bottom again are general fund. So what is excluded here? There is no expenses included in general fund when you look at it for OPEB, which is our retiree insurance, no expenses and liabilities listed for all of our outstanding bonds and debts, and no liabilities or expenses listed for either police and fire pension or Maryland state pension. And then there's a little chart right below that shows general fund. Now this is one that is talked about most often by all of our staff and is always a question. General fund, what is the general fund balance reserve, right? So we are reflecting this chart to show a 5-year history of what our budget versus actual percent is. And just as a reminder, we do have a policy in place that we wish to be at 16.7%. So for fiscal year 20, you'll see that the percentage ended up being at 18.7. Sorry, Brooke, a little bit more.
The next page, where does your money go, is just an infographic of the expenditures from the previous page, just a little bit different way to look at it.
So a different type and variety, a chart that's easier for people to see, and it gives it as percentage as well as dollars, so you can see the overall impact in the general fund. Primarily, again, taxpayer driven, right?
Property taxes, which is the largest revenue source in the general fund. This page explains how property taxes are calculated, the revenue generated by every penny in property taxes, and lists the top 10 taxpayers in the city. Capital investments and city debt. This page answers questions about how the city pays for capital improvement projects and the issuance of bonds. The chart on this page breaks down FY20 CIPs and the amounts spent, and then relates them back to mayor and council goals and priorities.
And this is a chart that wasn't easy to come by. You're not going to pick up the CAFR and be able to see this. But again, Brooke and two others within my department, and I won't steal their kudos because Brooke's going to do that, came up with this chart because it's nice to see our goals. It's nice to see the dollars that we spent associated to those goals from a capital perspective only. This does not include our operating monies. And then examples of what those dollars were. Again, not something you're necessarily going to see in our CAFR in a very easy to read format, but if, you know, hopefully if our citizens or anybody else, even employees, want to see a quick look at what we've spent on a capital side, they can pick it up. They can even relate that back to goals.
Okay, and then the last page, understanding your utility bill. This was supplied by the water and wastewater departments. It breaks down some of the components of a utility bill so that customers can better understand how a utility bill is calculated. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, there is mention of the upcoming stormwater management fee that will be included on this bill and an explanation.
So again, this wasn't anything that you necessarily are going to be able to see in any of our documents, but we felt it was important. It's one of those things that when you take a step back, what's important to our customers and our citizens, you know, they get these bills, help explain them, how can we break it down, how can we help make some of our information more readily available in an easy-to-see format, which is something at least 2 of the 5 in front of me have been challenging for a couple of years. And again, as Brooke has mentioned throughout, we've done a good job of making sure we are inserting everywhere about the new stormwater, because again, it's going to be a fee, and they're going to see it on this bill. But in addition to that, more importantly, we have a fund. It's going to be a separate fund. So things that have happened in fiscal year 20, and then also things that are about to happen in fiscal year 21.
I wish I could give you guys a standing ovation. I mean, I'm telling you what, this is fantastic. Great. This is great.
Thank you.
Really.
Yes.
Yep.
This
Excellent.
is easily one of the things I'm most excited about, and not because I didn't spend a single minute compiling it, but because it has been on our goals for a very long time to reincorporate, and we just have never been to the point where we've had staff on site long enough to do this. So Brooke Garver took it and ran.
Great job.
So
Great job.
Brooke, along with our financial and senior accountants, Brooke and Jeff, did this start to finish, and it is a great document.
Yep.
This is a good orientation too.
I just want to add,
For new members, this is great for orientation.
There's our budget
Just one
101
thing,
style.
This is fantastic.
This will help.
Yes.
we did apply for the PAFR award through the GFOA, which is very similar to the CAFR and the budget award. We just haven't heard back yet. And I just want to thank Jeff Lear and Brooke also, and also Eric Hastings for their help with this.
So yes,
Thank
Brooke worked with Eric and Wes. We challenged them, hey, we have this PDF, but that's really not what we like, because, you know, Recreation came in here and did their little booklet, and we were like, man, we got to do that too. So again, on the website, it's available in both styles and formats. So thank everybody.
Yes, thank you guys very much.
Hey, Brooke, do you have a sister?
All right, up next, Stormwater Protection Program.
I think this is where the standing ovations will stop.
We can all sit down now.
We just wanted to give you an overview of the program. The questions are ramping up from the community because of the flyers that we've sent out to help educate people on what this program is all about. The fee begins March 1st. For the new council members that weren't here in the last administration, where this was all put together, and especially for the people at home, we want people to have an understanding of the program. With me tonight is Elmer Weibly, the district manager for the Washington County Soil Conservation District. We're suggesting that he assist us with one of the incentive programs, and as I go through this briefing, then I'll give him the signal when to go over his part of this. So what I want to talk about tonight is basically just an overview of the program, give you a billing example, ways people can reduce their bills, and most importantly, how are we going to spend these funds that we're going to be collecting. Over the last 5 years, maybe the last 10 years, we've been working towards this, and this is just some of the Herald Mail headlines that I've collected over the last few years. Communities east of here have been dealing with this for decades. Chambersburg has a utility, stormwater utility. Frederick has one, Berkeley County to the south of us. But Maryland, we're considered now a phase 2 community, so the MDE has required us to do certain things that I'll go over here in a minute that is part of being a phase 2 community. There was articles in the paper the last couple of days about Maryland suing Pennsylvania for not doing their part, and this is just an ongoing issue that has its roots way back in the Clean Water Act of the 1970s. But the goal here is to clean up the water, clean up the streams, clean up the Chesapeake Bay, and all working together to reach that objective. So we started in earnest back in 2018. For those in the council last time, we had a three-phase process where we worked through and we tried to set up a program that was well thought out. It met the goals of the MDE permit requirements and developed a funding strategy that we could set up an enterprise fund so that we could address the issues that we're required to do. And one of the best things we did is we set up a citizen advisory committee, which Elmer was part of, that brought diverse perspectives to this, great insights, and collectively they put together this program that I think, again, is very well thought out. So the challenges that we're facing, so as a phase 2 community, MDE sends us a permit that allows us to discharge runoff into the waters of the state. And by far, the biggest challenge that we have is the first bullet, that the MDE requires that we treat 20% of the untreated impervious area in the city by the end of fiscal year 25. Treatment being that it needs to run through a stormwater facility, that it needs to be removed, or that we use some other creative ways of getting credits to do it. By far the biggest issue that we're facing. But also, we have 340 private stormwater structures in the city that we are required by law to inspect and make sure that they're functioning properly. And then another major issue that is going to be growing in the future is the city has 107 miles of storm drain buried beneath our streets. Most of it's over 80 years old. Most of it's never been inspected. And sooner or later, we're going to have to start replacing some of those things. So here's an overall map of the city. I know you can't read streets or anything like that, but basically the red area is the impervious area of the city. It's the roofs, the driveways, those kind of things. There are some gray areas on there, and those are newer developments that have stormwater management. If you take 20% that MDE requires of that red area, you get 396 acres of land that we have to treat per our permit. That's an important number to remember, 396 acres. So when we got our permit, the first thing we did was we looked at ways that we could decrease that number. So we took out entities that already had their own MS4 permit from MDE, and that brought the number down. And then we started looking for ways of taking credit for things that we're doing or could do, like street sweeping. We moved to 2 sweepers and just finding other ways of taking credit to decrease the amount that we have to deal with. Back to the second challenge, the infrastructure, the storm drain infrastructure is the inlets, the manholes, the pipes around the city. Some of it's starting to look like this though, clay pipe from probably the early 1900s. And those are all just things we have to deal with. But we also have opportunities with this program. And the first one is that we had an Attorney General decision that said that the curb system is part of the storm drain network. So effective last summer, property owners no longer have to replace their curb and sidewalk. The city does that because we can use the funds of this program to do that. Secondly, in that red area, the city doesn't own enough property to meet that 20% reduction goal. So we need help from the private sector. And to do that, we need incentives. So the other opportunity is that we could have 2 types of incentives that large scale and small scale, to have private sector invest in the program to reduce the stormwater runoff. And the third opportunity is what we're going to talk about here in a little bit, is a possibility of a residential hazardous disposal program. So some of the key findings from the Stormwater Committee: we needed a good revenue source, we needed it to be fair. They suggested it be based on impervious area. And they broke it down to a building unit of 1,000 square feet, 35 feet by 35 feet roughly. So it's not a real fine building unit, so we're not out looking at a property and determining if that square foot is in or out. It's broken down by 1,000-foot increments, square foot increments, which is helpful to make it easier to understand it, I think. And then the city should pay for city-owned property, and other government units in the city should pay for theirs as well. Some of the other findings of the committee was that taking care of the storm drain infrastructure that we haven't done much with over the years is a core responsibility of the city, that incentive programs are important, that credit policy needs to be in place where people can lower their bills, and we'll talk about that in a minute. That we could utilize the wastewater treatment credit from our wastewater plant, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. And eventually all this boiled down so that we're moving forward with the utility fee that begins March 1st at a rate of $32 per 1,000 square feet, and it's applied to your quarterly water bill. And for the average homeowner, it's about $5 a month. A lot of people like to know what it's going to affect their monthly budget. So that's the average homeowner. The reason we looked at whether just to have a property tax increase or this fee, and the reason that the property tax was ruled out is that the fee is we felt was more fair and applied. It took some of the burden off of residential properties, and it just seemed like it was more fair basis to have it based on impervious area. So here's a sample of a bill calculation. My notes here. So let's say this is a half-acre lot that has 3,345 square feet of impervious area on there, which we've calculated from aerial photography. Divided by the building unit of 1,000 square feet, you get 3.34. We naturally round that to 3 building units. Take that times the rate of $32 per year. So this property would pay $96 annually, $24 per quarter on their water bill, or in their monthly budget, they should figure on $8. Property owners can reduce their fee in two ways. One is they can remove impervious area, like an old garage or outbuilding, or remove blacktop, but that's probably not going to happen too often. So a more likely way to reduce your bill would be to actually install or maintain some sort of a stormwater best management practice, rain barrels and things like that that Elmer will be talking about here in a second. The credited amounts can be anywhere from 15 to 60%. The more water quality you provide for the water leaving your property, the higher the credit's going to be. People would say, well, why don't I get 100% credit? And it's true that if you put in, say, a rain barrel at your property, you decrease the amount of runoff leaving your property and therefore the amount of contaminants that would enter the stream. But we still have to pay for street sweeping program. We still have to pay for the curb replacement program, storm drain maintenance that we talked about, and permit compliance in general. So no one's going to get 100% credit, but you definitely can get credits. A credit is a credit to one property. Actually, though, shifts the burden of the cost to other properties. So we have to be careful that we don't. Another reason why 100% credits wouldn't be applicable. Here's the overall program cost. It'll generate about $2 million a year in revenue. We'll have some bonding in there in the out years to complete some of the projects. By far and away, the biggest amount of money being spent here is on capital projects to fulfill that 20% reduction in the impervious area. The Stormwater Committee also suggested that we have incentives. Again, we can't afford, or no, we don't have the land to meet that 20% goal, so we need private investment, and therefore we set up two incentive programs. The first is kind of the large-scale commercial incentives, and that would be that if you have a shopping center or commercial site that has maybe some blacktop you don't need anymore, or there's other things you can do like putting in stormwater management, the city will partner with you to help pay for that. We've earmarked $250,000 in the program to help make that happen, and that goes towards our 20% credit. For residents, the more small-scale incentives, we have a program that we want to suggest to you that Elmer, with the Washington County Soil Conservation District, will help us implement, where people can do some things on their property to reduce their bills. That's, of the dozens of phone calls that we've gotten, that's one that people like to talk about. So I'm going to turn it over to Elmer, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about your program and your vision for that.
Thanks for having us here this evening. I also want to introduce our Urban Program Director, Dee Price, sitting in the back. If we decide to partner with this, you'll probably see her more than myself. Also want to just thank Rodney for getting me into all this. He invited me to a meeting, and the first meeting, Mayor Brucey swore us in. I had to hold up my right hand and swear that I would do a good job. And I thought, holy smokes, Rodney, what have you gotten me into here? So this residential small-scale incentive program is a natural fit for the Soil Conservation District here in Washington County. We gave you each an information packet so you can get to know us a little better. There's a brochure about what we do. There's a synopsis, we call it a highlight sheet of our fiscal year 20 accomplishments in the community. But I also included some flyers from the University of Maryland that I think are very helpful. The first one you'll see when you look through that, I'm not going to go through each of them, but just to let you know that this type of program is ongoing in quite a few jurisdictions who are MS4 Phase 2 communities and have been for many years. This is a way to involve your local citizens in the city of Hagerstown in conservation in their own backyards. It's also a way for them to get a reduction in their fee. As Rodney said, it can't do away. If it's $96 a year, the fee reduction is something we'll be coming back to you with a recommendation as part of our agreement under this pilot program we'd like to do together with you. We feel we're a natural for this because this really is what we consider to be voluntary, incentive-driven conservation. So this will be conservation being done in people's yards, on their lots that they choose to do. And then the city partners with them to share the cost of the installation of these practices and then end up reducing their annual fee. So they become partners in improving the quality of life, the quality of water, and helping the city meet its goals. So we will take that approach in developing it, that it's voluntary, incentive-driven conservation. Our first step is an 18-month long pilot program we'd like to do with the city. We allow a little extra time in that so that we get this right and we get it in a format and in a way that fits this community specifically and can reach the most people. So we hope that we can get started soon on that. We have quite a few ideas about how to do it. And for us, this is natural for us. What we are proposing that we do and become a partner with the city in, we do every day with our agricultural community through agricultural cost share programs that are voluntary. For us, conservation is all about people, about meeting people and listening to people and seeing what their conservation needs are, and then finding ways to help them accomplish them, educating them. And every conversation that we have with folks, even if we say, no, we can't help you, it'll be an educational touch point in the community about conservation and about what the city is doing with their stormwater utility and doing their best to improve the water quality. So hopefully we can get our MOA signed soon, and we'll get started to work. And what we're going to propose will all be up to you to decide. That makes me so happy that you get to decide what the program will look like because you are the community representatives that we want to serve. Thank you.
So there'll be a MOA in your packet to approve with the Soil Conservation District if you're so inclined to do that. So I just want to finish with how we're going to spend the money. So in addition to incentives, there's 5 main parts of our restoration plan. The first one is street sweeping. So last year we collected 410 tons of trash and debris off of the streets with our street sweepers. MDE gives us a credit of 164 acres for that tonnage. So the entire street sweeping program is paid for under this. The sweepers, the operators, the disposal of the material at the landfill, all of that's paid through this program. The second part is tree planting. We're working with the Department of Natural Resources and working with Nancy and the Water Department staff. They have 24 acres of city-owned land out at Wilson Plant, up in the Edgemont Reservoir, and even out here at the West End Tanks that they're paying to mow, and they are offering it to us just to plant trees on it. MDE would give us 9 acres of credit for that, and that wouldn't cost anything because of the DNR grant. Stream restorations are an excellent way to get credits. So we've talked for years about doing some stream restoration work at the golf course, the Greens of Hamilton Run. We're already doing some work out at Pangbourne Park that's being paid for by this program. Up at Long Meadow and Mills Park, we have a pretty badly eroded stream. And at City Park, we need to do some work there again on the stream. That could be an equivalent of 99 acres of credit per MDE. So stream restorations, what often is in urban streams, they look like what's on the left, where you have these deep cuts. Restoration projects return it to what's on the right, and obviously that minimizes the erosion, minimizes the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the sediment that's moving downstream, which is all a goal of the program. Number 4 is taking the old 1980, 1990 stormwater ponds that you've seen around that are just these big giant holes in the ground that you never see any water in them, and retrofitting them so that they hold water after a storm. There's plants in them to uptake the nutrients, the nitrogen and phosphorus out of it. And we are looking at 6 projects that we're targeting that we can get approximately 110 acres of credit by doing those. So good examples at the upper left is what they look like now. The upper right is what they would look like after they're retrofitted with the plants and being able to treat the water. The 5th one and final one are Green Street projects. These are projects that are fairly expensive, and we're not really planning on doing a lot of these, but there's places in town where we have this excessive pavement on our streets that we could remove the pavement and install these water quality planters. 2 potential projects we're looking at is up on Woodland Way and West Hillcrest, and for those we could get approximately 4 acres of credit. So the last slide is kind of the roadmap to compliance. All those different 5 treatment and structural treatments that I just talked about are listed there. And we have to get to the 20% credit threshold by FY25. If we don't meet it, our ace in the hole is the dark blue line at the top, and that's credit from the wastewater treatment plant. Our wastewater treatment plant is running so efficiently that it's actually exceeding the nitrogen and phosphorus removal that the state requires. So we can use some of their credit towards meeting our mandate from MDE. MDE says that's not a permanent solution, but what it does is it allows us to buy more time. So we can stretch the program out over years, hopefully keeping the fee lower and be able to meet the restoration goals that MDE is requiring. I did that as fast as I could.
Very good job.
Yes. Any questions?
I have 2 points. The first is, and I've said this before, I don't think any jurisdiction across the state is gonna meet 2025. I just don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I think that we are being as proactive as possible, exponentially more so than any other state that shares this responsibility. And to that end, for the council, and I think I said this when we had this discussion sometime past, and I haven't been following the county, so I don't know how far along the county, meaning Washington County, is in partnering in this process. But I think that the Pennsylvania, Maryland article is a timely article for these comments, which is, if you look at that map where all the red was, the reality is the county has developed over time through the extension of utilities and arguably and largely to our north. And all of that flow comes down through the city with this archaic sort of infrastructure associated with storm water management. And so we can't be the only responsible sort of entity that addresses those miles, those hundreds of miles of infrastructure, because a good bit of that flow comes down from the north end of the county, because it's got to come downhill to get down to the Antietam, to get down to the Potomac, to get down to the Bay. We simply happen to be south of where a good bit of county development has happened. And so we can't retrofit all of our stuff and charge folks in the city all of the fees we'll charge to do that if we don't partner in some manner to work with the county and the developments outside of the city that feed into those collection points. In fact, like we talked about with the culvert that goes by the old stadium. You know, the stadium doesn't flood, really. That culvert fills up and the stadium can't empty out. You know what I mean? That's, if you go down and see that. So we've got to address some of those things, but the county has to clearly be on board, you know, with us in that process. And so I'm curious to see, you know, how they approach those issues and those obligations outside of the city, so that we're able to look at projects and kind of work on them, you know, as single projects together when it's advantageous to do so.
And speaking of working together, I know that that you have presented to the Youth Advisory Council a couple of times, and even though this isn't necessarily a youth issue, I know that environmental issues are very important to that council. So if there's any way to include them on some of the projects or some of the discussions, it might be helpful for when you're trying to, you know, some outreach and such, some projects.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, when you talk to young people, environment's always like the thing it's the most important to them. It's almost
Definitely.
always that way. And, you know, they have an appreciation for that sometimes people my age don't. So,
Right.
yeah, we can definitely do that.
I just want to add about youth involvement, particularly for folks who might want to lower their bill and do a project in their backyard or front yard. Maybe they're older or on a fixed income and or disabled perhaps. To get the youth to come out and you know, plant the flowers for them and interact with them and be part of community, I think would be essential, and it would stretch what we do deeper into the community.
I would agree. I think that our council would definitely be on board with the Youth Advisory Council. I mean, I will help too. I'll help. I just volunteered everybody, but, yeah, if we could just make sure that.
Okay.
I'd
There's
like to see
something
them.
very special about doing those kind of plantings and then having the monarchs stop on their migration in your yard because of something you've done. If you have a chance, go to Kiwanis Park and see what we did with the city out there. To have that throughout the city and for the city to be able to help with that while meeting permit goals, be pretty special.
And just as a side note, the Youth Council is basically designing our Earth Day and Arbor Day this year in
Right.
April. So we're going to be working with them on April 24th in City Park.
Yeah, this will fit nicely with their goals.
Well, I just want to say congratulations for answering a 200-plus-year-old problem of who owns and maintains the sidewalks. So I think we finally answered that question. It's only taken a couple centuries, but there we are.
I will say, we've taken probably 50 to 80 phone calls here in the last few weeks, and a lot of people are saying, for this amount I'm paying, and I don't have to worry about my sidewalk replacement anymore, I'm good with that.
I'm in.
Not everybody says that, but we've heard that a lot.
Well, you know, I mean, we looked at that in '08,
Yeah.
couldn't figure it out, but here we are. So, figured out. Thank you.
Are you guys okay with entering into the pilot program? Isn't that the ask today? Good?
Okay,
Is that all you need from us?
that's all we need
There's
for you.
just a yes
Yeah.
on there?
I'll
Okay.
get you a corrected copy. I made a math error. It's not gonna cost you any more money. I'll get
Well, you
that to
did
Rodney.
take an oath, so-
I'll get that to Rodney for you guys for final consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we have At Your Door Residential Hazardous Waste Collection Program. Mouthful.
Hey, good afternoon.
This is Chris Pilzer with the Waste Management, Pat Harity, also with Waste Management. He's been here many times before. First, I want to thank these guys for all the work they've done in these snowstorms. It's a thankless job, but his crews pull through, and I appreciate all the work that they've done. You're welcome. We have a proposal here for you. There is nothing mandating that we have to do this. This is completely a decision that we can make. But it's a proposal to collect household-generated hazardous waste, things I've listed in the memo there, like garden chemicals, household cleaners, paint products, and electronics. And we have a video here. It's 3 minutes long. We like to show it because it basically shows you how the program works. Then I'll have Chris elaborate on it a little bit more, and then we can discuss it. So.
Thank you for contacting us and taking the first step in scheduling a home collection of your unwanted home-generated special materials. Within the next week, you will receive a collection kit in the mail. Inside, it contains a large plastic containment bag, an instruction sheet, labels for your use if you should need them, and a pull tie. First, read the instruction sheet for the list of items that can be collected in your area. Now go through all of your items and inspect them. Check to see if the containers are leaking, as they can't be collected if If they are leaking, then you need to pour the item into a non-leaking container and identify it. Each item must be clearly identifiable. When a label is worn off, either add a new label if you're sure of the contents, use the one supplied in your envelope like this, or take a permanent marker and write the type of material that is inside. If you have used stray fluorescent lamps, gather them together. You can tape them together or put them inside their cardboard sheets. Your rechargeable and lithium batteries. Take shipping tape and place it at the ends, then place inside of a clear plastic bag. All types of paint can be collected, but we need to know which type, oil-based or latex. Only cans of paint with liquid inside will be collected. We do not take empty or dried out paint. There are some items we cannot take, including items that we cannot identify, leaking containers, asbestos, construction debris, regular trash, large appliances, and more. Check your instruction sheet for the list of non-acceptable items. You may also reach out to your city's Public Works Department, Fire Department, or state agency for disposal options for items that are not part of this program. Before 7 in the morning on a specific date of your collection, place the bag outside in a specific location, such as near your front door or garage area. First, put down the plastic bag and put your home cleaners, paints, garden chemicals, automotive products, CFLs, and other eligible items inside. Then close the bag with the pull tie. Next to the bag, place your TVs, computer systems, vehicle batteries, stray fluorescent tubes. Now that's it. You do not need to be home during the collection, as our team will be there anytime during the day. Thank you for taking the time to properly prepare these items. Our goal is to recycle as much as possible, and we can do this with your help. You will also receive a survey, so please provide us your feedback. For further questions, check us out on our website or call 1-800-449-7587.
All right, so this is a pretty prevalent program we have in Western Pennsylvania. It's not in this area as of yet. We're vetting a couple locations. The location we're looking at is in Shenandoah at Pat's Hauling District. How many miles is that from here?
Martinsburg, so it's about 20 miles.
About 20 miles or so. So we're in the permitting phase with the state of West Virginia, but what we'll be able to do is service within a 60-mile radius of there and provide this service, door to door for the cities of Hagerstown. And it would be separate from the trash, and it's totally, everything's recycled. You would get a report, and it would go towards your sustainability goals, showing, the recycled materials and what you guys have, gone through.
So the cost of the program is, they're proposing, it's $1.45 per residence per month. The stormwater program, we feel, could pay roughly half of this, because these are the kind of things that we want to keep out of the storm drains. And we know from time to time, unfortunately, some of these things wind up in the storm drains when people don't know what to do with them. The other balance of the cost should come out of our solid waste fund. Right now, that fund cannot absorb the additional cost, so it would require an increase of about $2 per unit per quarter. So right now, people are paying $47 per quarter for their solid waste. It would go to $49 if this program was implemented. That would be the only increase in cost on that. We do think maybe there's going to be an inflationary cost adjustment in the upcoming budget for the waste program, but just a 2 or 3% increase, like something like that. But basically what you're looking at is, if you wanted to do this program, we would have to increase the quarterly solid waste fee by $2. But that said, city residents pay a fraction of what county residents pay for far better waste service. And and so this would just be another way to enhance our program. Again, though, there's no one requiring us to do this. We just wanted to give you the proposal to see what you think.
So I have a question.
Sure.
You said that it's pretty prevalent in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Is it in residential areas, or is it in
Yep.
the city? I think that I think it's great. I would love to
Yep.
get rid of my paint cans and stuff,
Take the
right?
thing off, too.
But to me, like having televisions and computers and such sitting along the street, I know that's something that code is a big.
So what would happen, you would register online or make a phone call, and they would tell you when they're coming. So it's not sitting out there that long. So they would say, okay, Shelley, right? Shelley, we're coming to get you on Thursday. Please have it out between the hours of 8 a.m. to 12 noon.
Okay.
So you would have a scheduled time.
So it's not like this row of
No, it's not just sitting out,
televisions.
so it looks like
Okay.
Sanford and Son, right? But it's mostly municipalities, some larger municipalities, anywhere from 8,000 up to 40,000 residents are doing it. It's real prevalent in California. We're starting to roll it out in Maryland now as well, just because with the sustainability goals and the zero waste goals, it kind of fits into that. But everything's recycled. We have third-party outlets for all the material, and we can give the city the full reporting of where that material goes and report it back to the city, so. I live in Virginia, I wish I had it in my neighborhood, we don't have it yet.
Do we get a lot of questions, like, what do I do with these things? Like, is that kind of an issue that we have?
Go ahead.
Okay.
So, yes, on almost a daily basis from residents. Many times, my crews are taking stuff that's unacceptable out of the containers, and since we don't, we don't knock on people's doors, we place it next to the container, or we tag the container. Those folks, in essence, will call Jeannie in the office, and then, what do we do with paint cans? What do we do with insecticides and electronics? Most of the time, we say, you have an outlet if you want to drive out to the landfill, Washington County landfill. Otherwise, that service is really not available. That's
Well, you have to
unique
have a
to
permit.
our offering. So it happens a lot.
Okay.
And it's a separate truck that would service this material, and the residents don't have to get it to curbside, they can just get it to the front porch or the, top part of their driveway. So if it's some senior citizens, they don't have to walk all the way down either.
Thoughts?
Will we get, along with that reporting, would we get a report on because if somebody's got a call and register, I'm assuming you're gonna tell us on an annual basis, hey, this year you got 975 calls.
Yep.
In other words, like I could see everybody sort of like initially, like me, I'll call you and be like, hey, I got 30 paint cans. I may not use you again for another 5 years, and so I'm just curious, we're gonna set this $2 a quarter in motion in perpetuity, and the initial call volume may be like 1,000 people, and then it might drop to like 200. I just think that, and I'm all for it, because I have the need for it, and I can see a continual need to some degree, but I'd be curious over time, and if it drops from like 900 or 1,000 calls down to like 200, then I think we should.
So we, along with the recycling report, we would provide you on a monthly basis. We would also give you the call-in report, because there's a separate call center for this service, and they call into that call center or email, and they log the amount of people that are coming in from each jurisdiction. So we would provide that, yes.
If we agreed to do this, would it be for a 1-year period, and then we could reevaluate? Or
Yeah,
how?
we could do that, yep. Yep. Maybe a couple option years or something like that, but we can give you some references, on this program, so people are real happy with it.
I think to evaluate it after a year, I mean, to see where we are, people using it.
You guys are the first municipality, we've talked to about this. We have several others, along the 81 corridor that really want it, and we're gonna be talking to them next. But you're the first ones we presented it to. Just
Because
because we have a good relationship with you.
We're super edgy.
It's good, it's good.
We're
It
so
wouldn't
good.
start until July anyway.
Right, it would be the next fiscal year. It would take some time. They don't have their permits yet.
We're 6 months out of permit.
And, yeah, all we really need to know is basically a nod of the head that we can start working this into our budget, or, adjusting the budget one way or the other, depending on what you want to do. And then, you don't have to make a decision tonight, but it's just a proposal we wanted to give you.
Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
If it wasn't for a certain 13-year-old at my house, I'd have been doing a can a week in a bag. They're sitting in the basement just waiting for this to start.
Yes, I have so many paint cans, I'll be like, here.
You gotta take them all.
So many paint cans.
This may be a conversation for another day too, but since they're here, I think we should explore the possibility of matching trash cans like we had discussed several years ago. with so many places, especially downtown, not having access to hide their trash cans, I just think it would improve the quality
For
of.
the city to
like-
issue trash cans?
Yes.
Okay. We can put together a proposal on that.
That'd be great.
Sorry, I know that's more money. I just drive around all the time and see mismatching trash cans and trash piled everywhere. And if we had more uniform like the county does, I just think it would be more visually appealing, especially downtown where it's so densely populated.
I agree.
Yeah, the reason in the past, we issued recycling totes is because the savings of the money, the savings of those items not going into the landfill, we basically paid for the totes in a few years. Trash is a little bit different. There's no way to offset that, but certainly the aesthetic is important. We can put something together.
There's some new carts out there now too. They're called Echo carts, and they're fully recycled, from recycled material. I can send you the information on it. They're pretty cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryder.
All right, up next, review of public service funding requests for second allocation of CDBG funds. Hi, Jonathan.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. In December, we had discussed with the Mayor and City Council the special allocation of CDBG funding labeled CDBG CV that was awarded to us on behalf of the CARES Act legislation. Of course, we had received an initial allocation in April of 2020 in the amount of $472,845, and that funding was already committed in July, and our public service partners are out in the community expending that funding. And I listed in the memo an update on those partners and where they stand with expenditures. And during the December discussion, the City Council advised staff to begin a new application cycle for the second round of CDBG CV funding that was awarded to the city. That amount was $274,365. And we began the application cycle for that in late December, and applications were due in late January. And as a result of the application cycle, we've received applications from 5 different entities. And one update that we wanted to make the City Council aware of, as of this morning, the Washington County Community Action Council, they have formally withdrawn their application. They have understood that there is a large amount of funding potentially available on the horizon for them for rent assistance resources in this community on behalf of the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. So at this time, they have formally withdrawn their application of $150,000 for additional housing stability programming. So with their application being withdrawn, it actually takes funding requests to a lower amount of the total amount that's actually $84,000 less than what is available. So we, at this time, can then focus on the applicants who have submitted applications, and I was going to go over those applicants in a brief summary of their proposed uses, and then from there we can discuss next steps and potential funding scenarios with the amount of funding available now exceeding the total amount of applications on hand. So the applications received that are active would be the Hagerstown YMCA, and they would be seeking funding requests for child care support. They've described there's a lot of low to moderate income city residents that utilize their child care services, and the needs for child care have spiked through the pandemic because of the virtual learning situations with our local schools. And they are seeking $25,000 that would help support child care costs of the impacted families that are eligible utilizing their child care services at the YMCA, and they would be only used for City of Hagerstown families that are utilizing their programs. Horizon Goodwill is a newer type program that they are proposing called Whole Family Learning Parties and a Downtown Restaurant Partnership. There's basically 2 distinct programs that they're seeking funding for. The best way I can summarize it is the Whole Family Learning Parties are looking at households that need support addressing barriers to household income and also barriers with learning and education. So there's components of assisting households with financial literacy, workforce development, also providing support to youth in those households with the educational needs in this virtual learning environment. And this would be a partnership program with Goodwill, I believe, being the lead agency. There also is some partnership with On Track and also Shepherd University. And the program did receive letters of support from Congressman Trone, On Track, Greater Hagerstown Committee, the Chamber of Commerce, and Shepherd University. Just wanted to point that out, that they were looking at this program collaboratively with multiple partners. And their funding request is $85,260 for the whole family learning parties aspect of their application. Then a secondary aspect of their application is downtown restaurant partnership for food resources to low to moderate income households that are impacted in the community. And they would be looking to have breakfast delivered in partnership through a downtown restaurant to pandemic impacted families. And the funding request for that program would be $58,500. The Community Free Clinic submitted a funding request that would be in support of mental and medical health services, continuing the existing services at the Community Free Clinic, but for, I guess, clients that are targeted, that have been impacted in some way by the COVID-19 pandemic. Their request was for $10,000. And then finally, the Commission on Aging request was a continuation of their programming from this summer, which they had received the initial allocation of CDBG CV fundings for food resources for vulnerable seniors, where they would work with food delivery services to deliver food to vulnerable senior citizens in the city of Hagerstown. So again, wrapping up, the total funding requests of those entities minus the minus the Community Action Council request that has been withdrawn, the total request now would be a total amount of $189,418, which again is $84,947 less than our available amount of $274,365. So depending on where the City Council, where the Mayor and City Council would like to decide on allocations of the existing active applications that I went over tonight, of course, a clear scenario could be if everyone's comfortable with those applications and those programs, we could fund them at their maximum amount of request. And then, of course, then if that's the case, we could then look at the $84,947 that are still available in the CDBG CV allocation. And a few options to maybe consider with that funding is we could obviously work with the existing applicants to see if there could be a proportionate distribution to those existing applicants if they could take on that additional funding. We could for sure hold another application cycle again with this remaining amount that's still available. Or we could even revisit with HUD some options. There are definitely options where I've seen other communities utilize some of the CDBG CV funding for some small administration costs in carrying out the program, either through the subrecipients or the local government. That could help offset some general fund impact with staff costs in administering the program. So those are the options that we discussed this morning with Scott and Michelle, just again because that was this morning when Community Action Council would withdraw their application, thus making that additional funding available. So with that said, I would ask if there's any questions or concerns with the current applications, and then suggestions from the City Council on next steps with that remaining funding that would be available.
Thoughts?
Go back and get rid of it, yeah.
To maximize it with the existing applicants?
Yeah.
I have a couple of issues. The first is YMCA, the 25,000. One, I didn't read in there where it specifically says it will be for households that live within the city of Hagerstown. Did I miss that?
That was not in the application. I did follow up with Maria at the YMCA, and she did put in writing and can put it in more formal writing if required, that she would be assured us that that would be used for only City of Hagerstown families. I did actually bring up that concern with her.
And the second I have, and this isn't specifically to the YMCA, but I think this is a need, but I have some difficulty that it is then targeting one specific daycare provider There are multiple daycare providers across the gamut of the city that provide those services to a lot of city residents who need this assistance right now. And all I'm saying is, if that's one of the facets that we're considering, then I think in fairness, you know, if there is additional funding, that we need to make those entities aware and target it to those entities that could also use those funds at this time for that same purpose. I have a hard time sending it to the Y and not, you know, other daycare providers that, you know, probably have a higher than 35 to 40% rate of individuals that would have that need.
But anyone could have applied for this, right?
Yeah, I mean, now that we know that, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like we can reach out and say, hey, you know, we have this additional funding and this is one of the target areas we'd like to target with it. You know, if there are other daycare providers within the city that could utilize that, you know, we should make it in some fair way available.
But isn't the challenge going to be the fact that they would have to be a nonprofit? I mean, aren't the daycare providers that you're referring to? I mean, I agree. I think that would be an excellent, I think that's an excellent idea. I don't know how many other nonprofit daycare providers there are.
What about other after-school programs that have been providing virtual learning and daycare?
Well, maybe like the Boys and Girls Club or something.
Yeah, no.
But that's a very little cost.
The Robert W. Johnson Community Center.
What's a very low cost?
The Boys and Girls Club, I'm saying that it doesn't, and I'm not saying that it's, but that, I agree. I think that's an excellent idea. I just don't know you know, I would imagine there would have to be a nonprofit, correct, Jonathan?
Yes, in general, we've always administered these public service funds for nonprofit entities. CDBG in general isn't always restricted to nonprofits, but typically public services are. We could certainly go back to the drawing board to see if there are any other options when it comes to for-profit child care service providers.
So do you want to fund the ones that we got and then open an application process back up for the other 86,000?
That was just one of the two concerns. The second one is definitely this Horizon Goodwill Industries proposal. I mean, I don't know how to say it. I think that proposal is morally wrong. I just do. I mean, I just look at that and I use this comparison. You got the Washington County Commission on Aging who's sending us an application saying that they've got seniors on the waiting list and they're providing these food resources for 200 people at basically 50 cents a person, $10,000. And this other one's $60,000 for 300 people, which comes to about $650 a person for that breakfast program. I mean, listen, I'm a dad of 5 kids and I feel great at the end of the day if I can go to the grocery store and buy a meal where it's about $1 per person, you know, per meal to eat. And I just look at that number and think to myself, number one, wow, that seems to be a high number for the speculative possibility that a certain number of individuals may show up to receive that service in an already finished fashion, meaning not you know, goods that can be prepared later. The good is already prepared. And number two, it's being extended to one single restaurant, and I get it, you know, but if that's an approach that we're looking to take, you would think that that would be open to the myriad of restaurants that exist within our downtown that are also, you know, feeling that same pinch and may be able to provide, you know, comparable service. I have a real big difficulty with doing it when I look at these others. I mean, and I'm going to be very frank, I'd rather give the Commission on Aging 4 times what they asked for, because that's the amount CAC basically expended and exhausted immediately last time, and there's still a waiting list, and I see that, and I feel the same with the Community Free Clinic. I think both of those entities basically asked for the bare minimum, even though they knowingly have way more than that they need funding for. And I look at this other program and think to myself, you know, we're going to provide the bare minimum to these two that have excessive need, for this other one that has a very speculative idea. And I think that on the other side of that, the CDBG CV funding request for the HGI Whole Family Learning Party, I mean, I don't see that any differently than the conversation we had recently about the funding being used for new business expansion, business startup. That to me seems like a whole new program that an entity is going to start, and these funds aren't for that. These funds are to help at this time of need when there are entities and individuals that have loss of funds and need to backfill and need to address individuals that are already in that need. And I've got a personal issue with that being the biggest receiver potentially of funds that don't accentuate what I believe and continue to believe the purpose of that funding to be for.
So the whole family learning party, you guys want to take that out?
I think that's a very good point,
That is a good
Kristen.
point.
I would agree with that.
Okay. How do you guys feel about the downtown restaurant partnership for food insecurity?
Does it have to be only one restaurant for that?
Well, I'm curious
With
if
other
they,
restaurant, maybe,
yeah, I'm wondering if they reached out to other restaurants or if this was something maybe Bulls and Bears proposed. I'm sure we could find that out.
I don't know. I just don't like the idea of the speculative, already prepared food approach. I mean, folks, frankly, and I think we saw it in the paper the past couple of weeks where various churches are doing, go pick up the box of foods prepared later. I just think that individuals in that time of need through the pandemic process are much more attuned to looking for that than they are to come get a breakfast, which, you know, compared to that food cost, purchase food cost, is exponentially higher than what you're able to obtain those foods to prepare later and distribute to the public.
I think maybe me be more comfortable with it if it was going to the places where they had the families in the hotels. Like if there was like breakfast prepared and then it was going to a Goodwill and CFC place for people to be in the hotel at different places on Dole Highway. You know, that families maybe not being able to get to Goodwill to have breakfast, I think that would make a lot of sense to have breakfast prepared and dropped off if it was like that.
That's a good idea.
Those people can't cook and stuff in their rooms
And with the number of nonprofits we have, I'm just surprised that
that's it.
we have very limited applicants that fits our requirements. I'm just concerned, like, you know, what we just mentioned, there's other youth centers, nonprofits that are having after-school services and impacted by COVID, and I was expecting more.
Jonathan, how do these nonprofits, like, what is the process of them learning? Like, how do they know that this kind of opportunity is available?
We typically advertise on our website and in the newspaper, and we have a large listserv. We have a large CDBG list of nonprofit email contacts that get email notifications, and it's typically multiple email notifications that funding opportunities are out there. And I know you mentioned Boys and Girls Club. I know they're on our listserv. I believe a lot of the after-school youth programs are on our listserv as well. So again, it can be maybe intimidating because of the whole CDBG and the federal requirements at times. I'm not sure if that's what's maybe presenting some hesitancy with applications, but that's just speculation on my part. We could certainly step back and if there are applications that we're comfortable with moving forward with tonight, we can begin, I think, that process to lock in that funding. It would just be determining what funding's still available then in this current allocation to advertise again if need be.
So do you guys want to take out the 2 Horizon Goodwill applications, approve the other ones, and then re-advertise?
Well, I want to ask if we could give more monies to the free clinic and Commission on Aging, like.
Well, can we open the application process back up to them too and let them know if you need more money, you can apply for it?
Yeah, because I think they're being very modest.
Yeah.
Especially if there's a wait list, you know. Of course, awareness of mental health right now is huge, so.
They may have
10,000
restrictions on what they can ask for too, based on their other grants that they've applied for and such like that, so,
True.
you know, but if we can lock in this and remove the Goodwill for now.
I'm fine with that. Are you guys good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mayor, with the Horizon Goodwill application, I know it was newer. I don't know if we'd want to give them, it's up to you and the city council, if maybe they wanted to provide answers to some of the questions or concerns to maybe clarify and also maybe provide more detailed or specific information related to those concerns. Again, the application process for the CDBG CV funding, this is very new, and obviously these were applications that are a bit outside of our normal process with the standard CDBG public service activities.
Okay, so you reach out to them and ask for more specifics?
Certainly, we can try to maybe at least take the questions and the concerns that were brought forward, and I would at least like to give them an opportunity to maybe provide a response. This is, again, the first time we've seen an application for such a program and proposal as well.
Okay, are you good? I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. With that.
Okay. So, I guess you're good to go?
I believe so. I think it sounds like if we're okay, we can reach out, with this plan, we can reach out to the Commission on Aging and the Community Free Clinic to see if there's maybe potential for them I think their application process is submitted. They could simply modify their award request if they feel like they could have the demand for that. So we could go ahead and do that. We can get information from Horizon Goodwill on follow-up questions in more detail from them. And then I think we were okay with the YMCA proposal, but also maybe there's a more targeted outreach to other potential childcare program providers, and we could look into see if it's restricted to nonprofit or for-profit as well.
Yes. Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, 2020 Land Management Code updates. Mr. Bachmiller.
Seeing that it is 6:20, I predict that you probably want me to be as quick as possible.
Wow, you are.
I mean.
You must be.
I'm like laser.
Firm grasp of the obvious,
It's
right?
only once a year this happens. You haven't been waiting for this?
Yes, all year.
But at 6:20?
I didn't think it was here so fast, Bob.
No, we just did it. Also, I do this.
Well, good evening. For those of you I've not met yet, my name's Steve Bachmiller. I'm the city's zoning administrator. I handle the development review process, so when folks come in to create subdivisions or develop property in the city, I'm the person who coordinates the review process that gets it in front of the Planning Commission and ultimately built. What I want to do is go through real briefly a little overview for the benefit of our new members of what this is all about. The city has what's called the Land Management Code. It was adopted in 2008. It consolidated 4 ordinances that really were written. They were written in 4 different decades, each in their own structures. They really did not work well together, so we rewrote them in several stages, but the initial reorganization was adopted in 2008, and we've been tweaking with it ever since, but we think we've finally got essentially the final product at this point. By doing it in-house, even though it took us several years to do it, it saved the city probably over $100,000 because such a project, if we were to give it in contract to an outside consultant, it probably would have, by my estimate, it would cost the city over $100,000 to do so. And what ended up resulting is the Land Management Code, which is Chapter 140 of the City Code. There's 8 articles. Article 4 is our zoning ordinance. However, the site plan standards that were previously in it were moved over to all the other development standards in Article 5, which is now the subdivision and land development ordinance. Article 6 is the floodplain management ordinance. Article 7 is the forest conservation ordinance. They all operate under a common definition section and authorization section earlier in the ordinance. Why do we do an annual update? Issues needing to be addressed and errors and omissions in the existing text are identified periodically, Errors need to be corrected, and other issues sometimes require codified means of addressing them. Amending the code requires significant staff resources, public hearings, updating the revised code, and the cost of public notices. Therefore, it's more efficient in staff time and city funds for staff to compile issues to be addressed over the course of 12 months and process all proposals brought forth at one time, rather than bringing them to you every month. Hi, we're back for another minor revision to the ordinance. We just simply stack them up and then process them once a year. Occasionally, the mayor and council will determine an issue of such importance that it directs staff and the planning commission to pursue an individual amendment without waiting for the annual update package. However, this is rare. So occasionally, we do have things that come up that we will deal with individually, but typically, we handle revisions once a year. Okay, now, moving on to what we're here for tonight. It's the 2020 annual update package. You received a memo in your notice posting, a cover memo that summarizes everything, and then the actual text of the individual proposals. There are 15 proposals, only 15 proposals in this year's package. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on these proposals in December, and after taking comment, forwards these 15 for your consideration. This year's package is smaller than in recent years and represents correction of minor errors and addresses some policy issues that are not as sweeping as in past years. 5 of the proposals are administrative corrections and will not be discussed in detail unless you have specific questions about them. Those are proposals 1, 2, 3, 4, and 15. There are 10 policy proposals, which I will be giving you a brief summary of here. How to read the package as you go through and you're looking at the actual individual proposals in the package. Black text that's unmarked, that is existing ordinance that will not change. Text with a strike through in it is, strike through lines in the text is existing text, which will be removed. Red text would be added, and then anything that's in blue is simply direction or advice, for lack of better words, from staff to help explain what the proposal is, but it's not actually existing text, nor will it be. It's simply instruction, essentially. So I'm going to go quickly through the 10 that are actually policy issues. Proposal number 5 defines and permits small-scale breweries. We're finding that this is a new and up-and-coming element of the entertainment and tourism economy, and as such, our ordinance has been silent on them. So what we do is we define them and then also set parking standards for them. And then the ordinance proposes that they be allowed in our downtown area by right, and also in conversion districts, which is when a large, say, an old warehouse is converted, it could be considered one of those uses. It also allows them by special exception approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals in the CG, CR, IR, and IG zoning districts in buildings that were industrial and built before 1956, which are mostly around the outer fringes of the downtown areas. So the intent is to consolidate these and focus them in the downtown to help the entertainment economy, rather than having them out dual highway somewhere. Moving on to proposal 6. This adds certain uses to the CG, CMU, CR, and IR zoning districts. This is the result of some conversations we had with a representative of a developer who's looking to develop one of our larger undeveloped tracts in the city. He had some suggestions on how to make the ordinance a bit more inclusive. He did have some suggestions that the Planning Commission thought were inappropriate, and we did not forward those. These are the ones that the Planning Commission agreed with him, thought that they could be added. Also, gaming was included because of the likelihood of it being adopted by state law. The proposal is worded so that it's only that which is permitted by the state. Obviously, this is all going to be heavily regulated. If not adopted by the state, it would be moot. Zoning law is supposed to accommodate all legal uses, so leaving the ordinance dark on the issue would be problematic. If it's a legal use, we really ought to have something addressing it within our ordinance saying where in the city it would be permitted to go. Moving on to proposal 7, relax current parking requirements for manufacturing warehouse uses. when we were going through the development review process for the North Point developments out on Basil Boulevard and also the expansion of the Tractor Supply warehouse out on Hopewell Road. We were getting feedback that our parking requirements for manufacturing and warehousing was a bit over the top. Planning Director Kathy Marr did a study, called a number of different other jurisdictions in the 4-state region along the Route 81 corridor, asking how they all handle parking for these uses from anywhere from Carlisle to Winchester. And the numbers that we came up with basically cut our requirement for parking for these uses by about 25%, and it's in line with most of the other jurisdictions that Kathy surveyed. Proposal 8 is to eliminate front yard fence standards for through lots backing to the municipal boundary. This actually involves very few properties, but we found that the county's fence regulations are a bit more accommodating than the city's, and as such, we thought it was kind of pointless to have our regulations, which are more restrictive, up against the municipal boundary where right, literally a foot away, the adjacent property owner could do something different. We did put a line in, this is proposal 8, we did put a line in that basically exempts our more restrictive standards when they're up against the municipal boundary. Proposal 9, it refines standards for the development of lots in residential districts that don't front public streets. There are lots in the residential zoning districts that do not front a public street. The ordinances do not allow these lots to be improved by a house due to emergency access, fire, etc. Basically, these are lots that are locked back on an alley somewhere. However, if we don't allow them to do something with a lot, then it's essentially a taking of their property rights. So the ordinance does allow that these lots can be improved with a residential scale garage for storage purposes as a principal use to the property. What we found is the language is a little bit problematic. It kind of had a hard time differentiating between ones that had existing garages on them versus unimproved properties versus ones that already had garages, but somebody wanted to expand. So we're cleaning up that language a bit on that to make it a bit more user-friendly and understandable. Proposal 10 is to refine standards for construction of large accessory buildings on large lots in residential districts. These are tweaks to provisions adopted in last year's package that allowed larger accessory structures on larger lots than the ordinance otherwise permits. Typically, the ordinance limits them to 900 square feet. We came up with some language that's basically said for properties that are over 20,000 square feet, you can have larger accessory buildings. We have received one application so far, and we've processed it and gave us the opportunity to work with the regulations in a real-world set of circumstances and applying them. And we found a couple of minor holes that needed to be patched in the way we had written the language last year. Proposal 11 is to create flexibility in the administering of minimum floor area requirements for new dwelling units. In our zoning ordinance, if you're creating a new dwelling unit, it has to be a minimum certain size based on the number of bedrooms there are. It starts with an efficiency at 400 square feet, then there's a larger number for 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and then the final level is 3 or more bedroom. What we've found is when folks are creating new dwelling units in existing buildings, because of the shapes of the buildings, where the utilities are, columns that are supporting the building that can't be moved, sometimes it's difficult working with the existing spaces. So we actually did an interpretation. As zoning administrator, it's my job to interpret and administer the ordinance reasonably. We created an interpretation where basically if you're a little bit under the size of a particular unit due to the unique physical circumstances of the space that you're working within, if there's other units within the building that are going in that are going to be over, we kind of credit one to the other. It's definitely not used at all for allowing more units into the building than the ordinance would otherwise permit. It just provides a little bit of flexibility in administering this particular provision, so it's not unduly burdensome or onerous over small amounts of square footage. As zoning administrator, I feel more comfortable when things are more clearly spelled out in the zoning ordinance. Again, we've been handling this so far for a couple of properties as an interpretation. What this does is it codifies it and it puts it clearly in black and white language in the ordinance that the zoning administrator has the authority to do this. Proposal 12 is to move all remaining regulation of buffers to the design standards section of Article 5. A lot of our buffer standards back in the old ordinances were actually in Article 4 of the zoning ordinance. Over time, most of those were moved over to Article 5 with all the other land development standards. In reviewing the last package, we found there are a couple leftovers, and all we're looking to do is move them over to Article 5. So all issues associated with landscaping buffers are in Article 5. It will also take those couple remaining things out of the purview of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So if there's going to be a waiver or a reduction or a variance to those requirements, it's handled by the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Planning Commission, through the site plan process and the waiver process, rather than sending these couple remaining hanger-on buffer issues to the Board of Zoning Appeals. There will be some cross-referencing to buffers left in Article 4, but anything that's actually regulatory about those buffers would go over to Article 5. We're getting close. Proposal 13, refined language regarding the approval of final plats. We just found some awkward and odd language back when the subdivision ordinance was revised about 10 years ago. It kind of makes it imply that the approval of a subdivision plat that meets all of our ordinance is subject to negotiation or is discretionary on the part of the Planning Commission. It conflicts with law, and what we did with that is we made some minor tweaks to the language to make it a bit clearer what the intent was. And then proposal 14, this is the last that I'm going to be discussing, is the set paving depth standards for parking areas and driveways. What this does is it creates a process within the ordinance of your developing property, and you have a site plan that you're supposed to provide an analysis of the soil over which you're paving, and then making a proposal that would be reviewed in the site plan process by the city engineer to make sure that the proposal holds up, or the construction essentially that's proposed would hold up to wear over time. When we initially proposed this, we actually set arbitrary standards. Our asphalt needs to be X amount of inches thick, concrete needs to be a certain amount of inches thick, and the thought was that setting an arbitrary standard might have been overkill. So the thought is that as part of the site plan process, there's going to be, they will propose what the thickness will be, and it will be subject to review by the city engineer. Right now, the ordinance says that in certain circumstances, things have to be paved, but it doesn't say how thick. So you could put a little coat of asphalt this thick, and technically you meet the letter of the ordinance. So it just kind of clarifies things. So those are the 10 proposals that are policy-based. Again, I'm not going to talk about the other 5 unless you have specific questions, because they're truly just housekeeping and administrative corrections. The public hearing is going to be on February 23rd. The mayor and council typically will leave the record open for 10 days following the hearing to accept additional written comment. Comments during that time period can be forwarded via email to us at planning@hagerstownmd.org. And then we will return to you all on March 9th after you've had your hearing to find out what your thoughts are based on the materials or the testimony that you heard, and whether or not you want to move forward as it is or you want to make changes to it. And then once that happens, then we will go through an ordinance process where basically we pass a city ordinance to amend that code. And that's a process that by the time it's all done, it'll take us into June or July. With that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
You guys have any questions?
Questions?
I hope that was quick enough.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
City administrator.
Just one thing, city offices are closed on Monday for President's Day. Trash collection is as normal, so if we set out in the south end on Monday, we still set out on the south end. That's it for me.
All right. Keisha?
I'm sorry, no.
No, I don't have anything, thank
The
you.
only thing I have is if any of the fourth graders from Miss Plume's class took her up on her extra credit offer to watch this meeting, and you are still watching, I hope you get triple
Oh, my
extra
goodness.
credit.
Good job.
And that's all.
We
We're
need-
adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, goodness.
Hello and welcome to Council Wrap, and thanks for staying late tonight. Boy, that was a long council meeting this evening, a lot of work to be done in the work session. Seems like it's been about an hour and a half since the discussion ended on item number 2 on the agenda, and that had to do with the Healthy Food Initiative. And good enough to come back virtually and join me for Council Wrap, David Schuster and Brooke Grossman from Horizon Goodwill. Thanks for returning and giving a little more insight about what is a very important initiative. In my book, I think when I look at this, this is a very easy one in terms of it being a pretty easy sell, because certainly it's a lot about supply and demand. And there's just not enough supply for the demand downtown as it relates to healthy food initiatives. So let me start with this initial question. And I know that I believe Jordy Newman had touched on this a little bit in the discussion earlier, but how underserved is the downtown as it relates to those healthy food initiatives right now? And either of you can take that one. I'm sorry.
This virtual world is still hard sometimes, Wes, to decide who's going to speak first, right? And so as we highlighted in the meeting, I think there are some smaller markets that do have healthy options available, but there is not a full-scale grocery store anywhere within our city center. You know, the closest, as some of the council members highlighted, were the new Aldi or a Save-A-Lot. And when we're considering how many people live downtown that don't have regular access to transportation, or even riding public transportation, right? Think about when you go to the grocery store for your family, what if you had to ride the bus an hour and a half each way to get that food, right? By the time you got your frozen goods home, they're no longer frozen. So this is really about creating a viable, accessible location where people can meet the needs of what they need in their household without having to go to some of those extremes, like riding the bus. Or I don't know about you, I often see people walking on the side of Dual Highway with Aldi bags back into the city, right? So considering what we need to do for them. And I'll let you speak, David. I'm sorry, I just didn't know which one of us was going to go first.
No, that's fine. And you raised some interesting points. There's a couple of different ways to measure sort of underserved, and there's certainly a population that already lives in the community that doesn't have access to a regular grocery market. That if you look at a number of different factors that the data geniuses who compile information about food deserts put together to highlight these areas, would suggest that from a health standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from a demographic standpoint, these folks are clearly underserved by the grocery store, or by lack of grocery stores. One of the things that we don't have as strong a number on, quite honestly, in this community is, Jordy certainly shared the amount of food that his organization provided from a pantry standpoint. And while pantries serve a specific need in the community, in an ideal world, from an economic development, and quite honestly, from a dignity standpoint, you want to have folks have an opportunity, quite honestly, to purchase that food and not necessarily rely on getting things for free necessarily, if at all possible. There's a lot of factors that go into moving folks along that hierarchy to addressing their first basic critical crisis needs to, a place of sustainability and thriving. But you can't do that if you don't have the resource available in the first place, right? So, we know that. We know there's a wide variety of organizations that are out there serving hot meals of a day, although we don't have a great uniform way, as it turns out, around here locally, to know how many hot meals are provided unilaterally by all the many wonderful organizations who are doing that. And even with the food pantry organizations, we don't have a consolidated resource right now that measures those metrics either. So we can get individual pieces of data. I think the more interesting piece to us, quite honestly, is when you look at the health impacts and the community impacts of what happens to your health if you have access to food, what happens to what disposable income or discretionary income you may have if you're able to access the food that you need at a price that's affordable and it's here and it improves your health, and suddenly maybe not suddenly, maybe over some period of time, you find that you now have an opportunity to invest in your family, invest in yourself, or invest in your community as well by having, additional resources to do other things with, because now this resource to get food is here in the community.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because this starts with the healthy part. It's not just the food initiative, but it's the healthy food initiative, which is something entirely different. And I think when you talk about, Councilmember Alshire's comments, certainly looking out for everyone, I think is the way that he was sort of, focusing on all of this. But I think, Councilmember Brucci said something. I just want to look at it here so I quote him correctly. He said, direct competition, and that is not something that this is intended to do at all. There's no direct competition between the initiative, the effort that you're undertaking here versus those other places that sell food, whether it would be some type of convenience store that's close to the downtown or some of those grocery stores that Brooke referenced earlier. So how do you sort of address that, David? Because again, there are some parallels there, but it's certainly different.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, interestingly enough, one of the things that did not come up in our initial conversation here this evening was that, and along with the comparison of convenience stores, so if you're truly going to provide a healthy food options market like we are proposing, we're not going to be in the business of beer and wine. We're not going to be in the business of lottery tickets. We're not going to be in the business of cigarettes and things like that. There are some true items associated with the convenience world, and with the liquor store world and with all of those divisions. We're not proposing to get involved in some of those lines as well. And I think to some extent, competition is a healthy thing. It requires everybody to respond and advance their game and figure out what niche they're filling and how they're best going to fill it. And what I would argue in this case is that if the existing small markets and convenience stores were truly trying to fill a healthy grocery market space, they would have filled a healthy grocery market space. So, we certainly would not intend, and I am not in the business of trying to get other businesses to not exist. Believe me, I would rather see more and more development and more collaboration and more businesses exist, because honestly, that's what we need, right? We need that everywhere. We need employment, we need income, we need jobs, we need all of these things. But at the same token, there is clearly still a void in this particular portion of downtown Hagerstown that has not been sufficiently filled. So I would argue, regardless of the funding model, there is still space in a way that it could be viewed as competition, but it's probably not really as serious an issue as might be perceived on the surface.
And Brooke, if you would, address that workforce development component to this, because that's an important part of this entire initiative too.
Yeah, sure. So, I think one of the best hidden secrets about Goodwill is that we're not just a store, right? And that we offer services in our community to get people who are or underemployed working. And so, one of the things we launched here in Washington County just about 2 years ago was our Young Adult Solution Center. So as we've been exploring, which is serving 18 to 24-year-olds in our county that are not working and not going to school, many of whom are experiencing housing instability as well, was how many people remember their first job maybe being bagging at a grocery store or working as a clerk or a stocker? And so what a neat way for us to meet multiple needs of the community and support that younger population as they build their skills and their readiness to enter full-time work, and maybe are balancing this type of part-time job with a post-secondary education program or even a credentialing program at the local community college while providing them some income at the same time. So we have the goal to have positions in this location that would do that. And then also you have your managers and your regular clerks and those kinds of things who I think our intentions would be to recruit from the city for people to work at that location too, right? So it's also providing, just like the grocery issue, transportation is sometimes an issue for people to get to and from work. Now we'd be in a place where I could have a full-time job that pays me a living wage and I can walk to. And I'm doing something really, really cool, right? I'm helping this huge kind of initiative and to have this impact in my community.
And I know I'm an old guy, but, the reference tonight was to County Market being the last close grocery store to downtown Hagerstown. But heck, I remember when there was Grand Union and I believe A&P was in the same building down there on Baltimore and Summit, where they're talking about potentially putting a stadium at this point. Yeah, I know. Brooke's going, oh my gosh, that's before my time. But
well, so I didn't grow up in Hagerstown. So whenever he was talking about the county market, I was kind of like, I don't know where that is.
That's a whole different animal there, but a much newer one nonetheless. But David, after the discussion tonight, and that's why you come before the council to find out what they think about something like this, and certainly to get the city of Hagerstown as a partner in this, trying to bring so many different parties together to collaborate in order to make this work. So after what you heard tonight, what do you do with that feedback at this point, after hearing what the council had to say?
Sure. So I think, for better or for worse, a little bit of the ambiguity in the discussion tonight is simply created by the fact that this is a more complex business model than a for-profit grocery retailer having their real estate marketing business development teams vet a location and say, the surrounding demographic data we have says that we're going to make some money here. We're going to park a grocery store. We found some available real estate. We're going to go ahead. Maybe we're going to look for some tax incentives to come to from the city to come into the town. We're going to drop a location here, right? I don't want to oversimplify things, but the reality is, compared to building a model that is really focused on community engagement, workforce development, economic development, bridging the gaps between the multivariate communities in this supermarket access desert in Hagerstown, because quite honestly, if you look at the map, there are multiple different communities that are bridged by an initiative like this. This is not exactly simple work. And so I think that there are some good questions and concerns raised, which I certainly won't disagree with. And I appreciate the intent and to continue to work with the city administration to work on a pathway forward and a plan forward for this. But that was the intent, to be transparent and lift up the fact that this is a need that we've identified. And we think it's going to take a lot of work by many different groups to make something like this viable. And so, this is an early look at it, and we want to pursue it. So I think it felt like there's still ample opportunity here for us to work through some of those concerns, find a pathway forward that's agreeable, and to have this project be realized. And it's interesting, to your point about there were grocery stores, right? That really is the crux of the problem. The modern grocery retail world does not identify downtown environments like Hagerstown as a place that they're going to return to. They left for a reason, and it is challenging to return to. And in fact, I believe Councilman Brucey also referenced that at one point there was a pitch to try to get a retailer to come back, right? That to me says we know there's a challenge here, and perhaps an alternative model really is what we should be looking at. So that was encouraging. Among other things, that we also have history, right, that tells us maybe we should be looking at it this way.
What would be your ultimate vision here in the end? I'll kind of wrap up on this question. I'll let each of you weigh in on it. How would you see this working? Because in my mind, and I'm not nearly as close to it as you are, but believing in this project myself, that it is something that is needed, and that's my personal take on that. But at the same time, I look at it perhaps as like a city farmer's market on steroids, you know, something that would be open all the time, but something similar to that with those healthy food choices and food coming from those who you know, are able to produce it here locally. So, I mean, does that resonate with what you're looking at all? Start with you, Brooke.
Sure. So yes, right. And so I think that, you know, one of the biggest things that probably is easiest to miss with a project like this is that the food is the baseline of the project, but this is really an opportunity for us to have a collective community impact, right? To, like you said, a market of some sort on steroids, to do small business incubation, to be able to support vendors who are creating food lines or you know, other products that could be sold in a location like this that could be not absorbed, but highlighted by an organization and a project like this. To add, you know, ideally someday in my vision, there's a kitchen, maybe even a food hall, right, that is preparing healthy meals so that we're, again, teaching our community how to eat better, how to care for themselves better, so that we can all lose that 1 million pounds that Meredith has challenged us to do. And that now we have households that have the skills in place to not you know, spend their food budget on what is cheap and easy. They know how to take what is fresh and healthy and afford it and carry that into their household, right? So it's not, it is a grocery store, but it's so much more than that. And ultimately then, you know, our health metrics increase, which makes us more attractive to other businesses to want to plant themselves downtown. You know, maybe the next thing is there's a full service gym downtown. I don't know, but you know, there's those kinds of things because we're focusing on ourselves in a different way. And so, I mean, and for me too, we have seen it work in other places, and this is replicable. The city center is one of the food deserts in Washington County, but then we have a model by which we can serve the rest of our county, and maybe even we become, you know, a pioneer community within the state of Maryland to show other communities how to address their food deserts and what it takes in small rural communities to do that and turn those health metrics around, which in turn, you know, again, invite investment and economic development in their community.
David?
Well said, Brooke. I would add a couple of points. There is a portion of the city of Hagerstown community that needs a grocery store because they have no access to anything healthy anywhere currently. There is a portion of the downtown Hagerstown community that needs a grocery store because it aligns with economic development initiatives that we're hoping to realize in the future. And to borrow a phrase from our good friends at Meredith and Healthy Washington County, this is, in my opinion, an opportunity to go for bold. You can deliver this service and this opportunity and this resource at a number of different levels. And to what has already been shared, you can simply plop a small grocery store that's a little bit bigger than the convenience stores and focuses on having a wider variety of products in any number of locations. You can also consider bundling that with a much larger food network project that Brooke has already detailed that really could become an example of a shining star that may resonate across the community, across the state, and maybe even to other places in the country as the way to do this, the way to both meet the pressing need now to address equity issues, but also to do it in a way that is economic and workforce development forward, right? So where this lands, we're optimistic still. I think today was a great first stepping stone for that. But you know, obviously there's still work to be done. We know this. Nothing good ever came easy, right? So we're gonna keep working. We're gonna keep trying to identify how we're gonna make this happen. But I think at the end of the day, there's a wide open opportunity here to do something really remarkable that also really bolsters the community and helps everybody on a pathway to thriving. So,
David Schuster, Brooke Grossman, appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wes, for having us.
You're welcome. We appreciate the opportunity.
Sure thing. And that will do it for Council Wrap this evening. Thanks for staying late tonight with us, and we'll do it again after the next work session. We'll see you next week. Thanks. Thanks for watching.
Good night.